Marvel. I created a sanctuary in Marvel Universe. Chapter 41. Ding A Ling. Inside the Apostolic Palace, Yi Feng's phone rang again. He glanced at the caller ID and pressed the answer button. Yi, the Brotherhood of Mutants, they want to talk to you. Logan's voice came from the other end of the line, with the faint sound of wind and heavy breathing in the background, clearly indicating that the situation there was still very tense. Yi Feng held the phone, his gaze distant. Logan encountering the Brotherhood of Mutants meant that Magneto had already set his sights on Xiao Taoqi, Anna Marie. That machine, it was probably already ready. According to the original plot, soon after, Magneto would forcibly transform a senator into a mutant, and that person would ultimately die tragically due to genetic collapse. The machine was essentially a failure, technology simply couldn't truly wield the power to create life. The X gene was far from something a simple device could manipulate. All it could do was temporarily suppress or distort, never truly transform. What do you want to say? Yi Feng's cold voice emanated from the speaker. Despite being thousands of miles away, it inexplicably made every mutant present feel an indescribable sense of oppression, as if he himself stood before them. Your Eminence Yi Feng. Raven stepped forward, trying to keep her tone steady. The Brotherhood of Mutants has no intention of being enemies with the Vatican, or with you. It's just, Eric's plan requires that mutant named Anna Marie. If the plan succeeds, the future will belong to mutants. She tried to sway him with the greater good of their race, but the phone on the other end was met with silence. A moment later, a scornful chuckle sounded. Has Magneto lost his mind? Yi Feng's voice remained calm, yet carried an undeniable authority. Revolution does come with sacrifice and bloodshed, but it should never be wasted on such meaningless endeavors. Attempting to transform humans into mutants. You'd best first understand the true origin of mutants. He paused briefly, then decisively ordered, bring Anna Marie back to the Vatican. If they still try to stop you, then kill them. As his words fell, the call was directly cut off, leaving only a busy signal. Yi Feng gave them no room for further negotiation. The faces of the Brotherhood of Mutants immediately turned extremely grim. They hadn't expected that the other party wouldn't even give Magneto an inch of respect. Raven was the most shocked. Magneto's plan was highly confidential. How did the Vatican know about it? Has the Vatican's intelligence capability reached this level? Her expression was shifting, but she dared not say another word. Because at this moment, Clarice's eyes were burning with intense battle intent, the surrounding temperature rapidly rising, and the air distorting, making it difficult to breathe. You heard him. Logan grinned, his eyes filled with fierce fighting spirit. Yi Feng's stance is clear. You are welcome to visit the Vatican anytime. Before he finished speaking, the ground beneath his feet subtly trembled, resonating with his steady heartbeat, as if it could unleash a raging storm again at any moment. Raven's gaze swept over Logan and Clarice, her eyes full of unwillingness, but she knew deep down that she was powerless to break the deadlock. Given the power the two had displayed so far, controlling the Earth, wielding fire and space, in the Brotherhood, no one could match them unless Magneto himself arrived. Let's go. She gritted her teeth and ordered. Sabretooth glared fiercely at Logan, his eyes violent, seemingly still wanting to pounce and fight to the death. But catching sight of the flames swirling around Clarice, he ultimately suppressed his impulse. The taste of being burned to a crisp and then regenerating was not pleasant. The Brotherhood of Mutants quickly retreated, disappearing into the night. Seeing them depart, Clarice and Logan slowly reined in their powers. The dryness in the air gradually receded, and the ground's tremors subsided. Logan looked at the red-haired girl beside him. This was the Space Queen, famous throughout Europe. Her strength was indeed unfathomable. Are they gone? Xiao Taoqi Anna cautiously peeked out from the house. Seeing only Logan and Clarice, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. This is not a place to linger. We'll return to the Vatican first. Clarice turned to her, her tone softening slightly. She raised her hand, opening a shimmering golden portal. A mutant who could simultaneously draw the contention of both His Eminence Yi Feng and Magneto must be extraordinary, and needed to be brought back to the Vatican as soon as possible. Inside the Apostolic Palace, Yi Feng put down the phone and fell into thought. Magneto's disturbance would inevitably cause new waves in the already somewhat calm mutant situation, and humanity's fear and suppression of mutants would only intensify. Even without Magneto, someone would always jump out to stir up trouble. Not all high-ranking officials wished to see humans and mutants coexist peacefully. Even in today's world, with the appearance of demon gods, some still blindly believed that technology and nuclear weapons could suppress all supernatural powers. It seems it's time to completely unveil this mysterious veil. Yi Feng looked out the window. The mutant population was growing daily, and more ordinary people were becoming aware of their existence due to the awakening of those around them. It was futile for governments to try and cover it up any longer. Perhaps we can use this opportunity to formally bring the extraordinary world to the forefront. A plan gradually formed in his mind. Magneto's actions certainly brought pressure, but if handled properly, it could be an opportunity for the Vatican to further expand its influence. Currently, the scale of the Saint Fighter Legion was still too small, and its members still lacked practical combat experience. Cultivating strong individuals was not an overnight task. Yi Feng had the patience to wait, but he felt that the manpower was far from enough. Soon after, a shimmering portal opened in the Apostolic Palace, and Clarice returned to the Vatican with Xiao Taoqi and Logan. It seems you haven't slacked off on your training. Yi Feng's gaze first fell on Logan. Of course. I haven't been lazy for a single day. Logan smiled. Cultivating the cosmos is fundamental. Yi Feng nodded slightly. When you awaken your cosmos, your strength will undergo a qualitative leap. Upon reaching the sixth sense, practitioners will awaken their own superpowers. He paused for a moment, then looked at Logan and Xiao Taoqi, continuing. And the X gene, in a sense, is the superpower latent within the human body. In other words, if you awaken your sixth sense, your self-healing ability will further enhance. Simply put, cultivating the cosmos can not only help mutants better control their own abilities, but even further perfect and strengthen them. Do you understand what this means? This was an important discovery Yi Feng made during his recent meditation. Due to his unique soul, he himself had additionally awakened psychokinesis, and his element control power also increased accordingly. The element blessing ability was the effect of the cosmos's advancement. This unexpected gain might change the fate of the entire mutant race. This means, mutants are saved. Before Logan could respond, Xiao Taoqi spoke excitedly, her eyes sparkling with hope. We are no longer outcasts feared and rejected by humans, we will become the leaders of a new era. Logan took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in his heart. He rubbed his temples, his expression still somewhat dazed. The news he had just heard was too impactful for him. This was almost something all mutants dreamed of. And now, hope had actually appeared, so sudden, yet so real. Do you have confidence? Logan's face was serious, his voice low. He knew this was by no means a small matter. Once this news spread, it would be enough to overturn the existing world order. The high-ranking officials of ordinary humanity would never sit idly by, watching mutants rise and even surpass humans. Although relations between humans and mutants had slightly eased due to the external threat brought by the 72 Pillars of Solomon, the premise of all that was. Mutants had not truly shaken the foundation of human rule. The power holders of this world were, after all, ordinary people. But if mutants could truly evolve from awakening abilities, to gradually perfecting them, to systematically and intensively developing abilities, achieving self-breakthroughs, forming a complete evolutionary path, then the current world order would completely change, as Yi Feng once said. A new social system based on humans, with mutants as the direction of evolution. Thinking of this, Logan's breathing became heavier, and his chest heaved violently. Your physical quality is already close to the human limit. Within your soul, there is already the light of cosmos. Yi Feng's tone was calm, yet carried an undeniable power. The moment you truly awaken your cosmos, you will naturally understand whether all of this is true or false. He glanced at Logan, then looked at Clarice and Xiao Taoqi, his voice serious, but this matter, for now, can only be known by a few of us. Understand? A shiver ran through the three of them simultaneously. Although Clarice and Xiao Taoqi didn't fully understand the depth of the implications, seeing Yi Feng's solemn expression, they also nodded gravely. They trusted him and would never easily spread the word. I still underestimated you. Logan gave a wry smile and shook his head. I didn't expect the vision you described to me back then, to have created such a situation so quickly. He still found it somewhat unbelievable, but he trusted Yi Feng. The other party would never deceive him on such a matter. The time is not yet ripe. Yi Feng looked into the distance, his eyes deep. To achieve a bloodless, civil war-free shift in status between mutants and humans is extremely difficult. If we rely on force to suppress humans, even if temporarily successful, it will only deepen the misunderstanding and hatred between the two groups. To truly complete this step, we still need to wait. The plan had taken shape, but he knew that this matter could not be rushed. What's more, Yi Feng vaguely knew about potential future crises, the descent of Hell, the invasion of dimensional demons, and even Galactus. None of these beings were easy to deal with. Sorcerer Ancient One's life was on a countdown, about to return to eternity. Even Vishanti could not interfere with her destiny. How many more years could she protect Earth? Whether Doctor Strange existed in this universe was still unknown. Although in most universes the Sorcerer Supreme was indeed strange, there were exceptions. For example, Sorcerer Supreme Tony Stark. Because of this, Yi Feng held confidence in a non-Civil War transformation. But the premise was that he could maintain the fragile balance between humans and mutants in these few years. Otherwise, once the extremists among the mutants were driven to a dead end and chose to restart the timeline, all efforts would be in vain. Sorcerer Supreme and the Dimensional Demon might not be born by the same person. At the same time, deep within the Brotherhood of Mutants stronghold. Crack. The metal structure of the stronghold vibrated violently, as if it could collapse at any moment. Ignorant. Idealistic idiot. Eric growled, his eyes burning with rage. He hadn't expected that Raven and their mission would not only run into people from the Holy See but also that Clarice would directly take her back to Vatican. What angered him even more were Yi Feng's mocking words. He had originally thought that even if their paths were different, their goals were consistent. But now, it seemed the other party was merely a compromiser, slightly better than Charles. The plan remains the same. As for Anna Marie, I'll go personally. Eric ordered coldly, his emotions gradually suppressed, but his gaze grew sharper. Having traversed the world for decades, wanted by multiple countries, yet always remaining at large, he had never relied on anyone's benevolence, but on absolute power. Since Yi Feng invited him to Vatican, as a guest, then he would go meet this rising Holy See envoy. Eric, Yi Feng's strength is still unfathomable. From the news coming from all sides, he's probably stronger than we imagine. Raven couldn't help but advise. Although high-ranking officials of various countries tried their best to block the news, they still caught some whispers. Those ambiguous intelligence reports, the sudden actions of conglomerates to recruit mutants, all pointed to one fact: Yi Feng's strength far exceeded what was apparent. No matter who he is. As long as he obstructs the future of mutants, he is worthless. Eric's voice was cold. Yi Feng was not Charles, there was no decades-long friendship between them. He would not be soft-hearted. Even if Yi Feng's existence did bring some positive changes for mutants. I understand. Be careful with everything. Raven responded softly, she knew she couldn't dissuade him. She still believed in Eric's strength. The plan continued to advance. Just a week later, the target senator was successfully brought into the Brotherhood's stronghold by Raven, transformed into a mutant, and awakened his abilities. Eric watched all of this, the light in his eyes growing brighter. It was as if the bright future of mutants was already within reach. Indeed. I am the correct one. He murmured, his tone becoming increasingly firm. What does that kid know? He was convinced that his chosen path was the only way out for mutants. Keep an eye on that senator. Now, it's time to go to Vatican. Eric turned, his metal cape moving without wind. Anna Marie, he was determined to have her. Through the Brotherhood's special channels, Magneto quietly set off, heading straight for Vatican. A conflict was already imminent. Inside the Apostolic Palace, Yi Feng's mind suddenly stirred, and his sixth sense sent a clear warning. He opened his eyes and looked in a certain direction. Interesting. He muttered softly. A sixth sense warning, it's been a long time. Is it for me? Even stronger than Valak who descended. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Yi Feng slowly got up, ended his meditation, and pushed open the door. Your Eminence. Why are you? Outside the door, Clarice, who was guiding Xiao Taoqi in training, was somewhat surprised. Yi Feng had come out of meditation in less than a day this time, unlike usual. A personal matter. Yi Feng smiled faintly, not saying more. He couldn't possibly let the battlefield be in Vatican. The elemental robe silently covered his entire body, and the next moment, he shot into the sky, transforming into a streak of light and disappearing into the horizon. Enveloped by the elemental robe, even if his speed broke the sound barrier, it didn't cause the slightest sound. The private jet flew smoothly over the azure Atlantic Ocean, and the cabin was quiet. Magneto was resting with his eyes closed. His face was calm, but his mind had already envisioned the scene after the plan's success, mutants rising and establishing their new era. The destination, Vatican, was not far, and everything seemed to be under his control. Suddenly, the fuselage trembled slightly. Eric frowned slightly. Before he even opened his eyes, he heard the pilot's terrified shout, "What is that?" The originally calm sea suddenly surged. The azure water seemed to be stirred by an invisible hand, raising monstrous waves. Immediately after, a sea blue light curtain rose from the deep sea, rapidly expanding, like a miracle, forming a huge barrier spanning the sky and sea. The light flowed, as if containing endless mysterious power. The pilot desperately pulled the joystick, trying to turn the plane, but it was too close, and it was already too late. The plane was about to hit the light curtain. At that very moment, the entire plane suddenly stopped in midair, as if time had frozen. Rip. The metal on the top of the cabin was torn and peeled open by an invisible force. Eric slowly floated up from his seat, suspended in midair. His gaze was stern as he stared at the incredible sea blue light curtain before him, already understanding in his heart. "Aren't you coming out to meet me? The legendary angel of the holy sea." His voice was deep, piercing the sea breeze and echoing across the vast sea. The light curtain rippled slightly, parting like a water curtain to both sides. A figure slowly emerged, the elemental robe dissipating with the wind, revealing the person within. He was clad in white robes, with gold-embroidered edges reflecting the sea blue light, possessing an extraordinary aura, like a god who had walked out of a myth. In front of him, a white-covered book floated, emitting a faint glow. It was Yi Feng, who had recently shaken the underground world and was revered as an angel. Eric had to admit that the other party's very existence carried a chilling majesty. It was a symbol of power beyond common sense. "Hand over Anna Marie, and perhaps we can cooperate. Our goals are consistent, both are for the rise of mutants. You should understand me better than Charles." Eric's tone was cold, but a hint of apprehension flashed in his eyes. Yi Feng's gaze was calm, like the deep sea without ripples. "I can't do that." His voice was indifferent, yet it carried an undeniable resolve. "Whether it's you or Charles, you are limited by the era and by your cognition. Your vision is too narrow, neither of your paths can succeed." He slightly raised his hand, and the book in front of him automatically flipped pages without wind, slowly turning. "Even if you barely reach your expectations, you will be powerless to deal with future crises. Only by following my plan is there a glimmer of hope." Anger appeared on Eric's aged face, and killing intent surged. "In that case, it's war." Yi Feng did not respond, but slowly descended onto the sea surface. The book in his hand was placed face down, lightly touching the water. Centered on the book, ice quickly spread, cracking, and in an instant, the sea surface within several kilometers was frozen into a flat ice field. The two pilots on the private jet had already been sent away by Yi Feng using his ability, and now the plane was just a metal shell. "Come, let me see how strong the legendary Magneto truly is." Yi Feng remained calm, his white robe gently fluttering, and the pages of the book in front of him glowed faintly. "You're asking for death." Eric roared, suddenly spreading his arms. The entire private jet was instantly torn apart and disintegrated. Countless metal fragments, like a rainstorm, floated in the air, then suddenly accelerated, breaking the sound barrier, and rushed towards Yi Feng with an ear-piercing whistle. However, Yi Feng merely raised his right hand slightly, casually turning to a certain page in the book before him. Boom! Scorching fire surged out from the pages, forming a towering wall of fire. The supersonic metal, upon contact with the fire, directly vaporized, without even the process of melting, completely disappearing into the air. "Not bad. In terms of supernatural power alone, you are stronger than Valak's incarnated body." Yi Feng commented indifferently, as if he had just casually brushed away dust. Eric's pupils contracted, but he refused to show weakness. He raised both hands, fully activating his ability. Deep beneath the sea, metal ore buried beneath the sedimentary layers was forcibly pulled out, breaking through the ice, and suspended in the sky. The torrent of metal obscured the sky, as if the end of the world had arrived. This was his true power, the strength that had once shaken the Earth's magnetic field. However, Yifeng merely turned another page. All metal suddenly became still. Trillions of metal fragments suspended in the air simultaneously lost their power, as if frozen in time. How is this possible? Eric was finally horrified. He completely lost his control over metal, as if some higher level power had stripped him of his authority. Our abilities are fundamentally different, but what we can achieve is largely the same. But your physical body is simply too weak. Yifeng stepped forward, his voice still calm. He walked closer, step by step, and continued, without that helmet, you are not even Charles's opponent. I don't understand, and I'm very confused. How could something that you two could easily achieve by working together be delayed for decades with no progress? As his words fell, Yifeng was already standing in front of Eric. Telekinesis silently spread, completely immobilizing the other party in the air, unable to move. Eric breathed with difficulty, and a hint of fear finally flashed in his eyes. This feeling of being completely suppressed, he had only experienced it with one person. That Omega-level mutant named Jean Grey. Are you an Omega-level mutant? He spoke with difficulty. According to mutant classifications, it's not impossible to say I'm Omega-level. But my abilities are not limited to mutant powers. Yifeng smiled slightly, but it sent a chill down Eric's spine. He raised his right hand, and behind him, a brilliant star map suddenly appeared, with the Gemini symbol shining brightly. Eric, your value is almost gone. What? Eric's pupils constricted, but he couldn't even make a trace of struggle. Yifeng lightly threw a punch, a faint glow appearing on his fingertips, hitting Eric squarely on the forehead. Illusion Demon Emperor Fist. Extreme mental control poured in, Eric's expression stiffened, and a strange red light appeared in his eyes. All killing intent and resistance instantly dissipated, replaced by absolute obedience and respect. Yifeng subtly planted several energy imprints in Eric's body. He could not personally kill Magneto, that would break all previous arrangements and make him replace the other party as a public enemy of humanity. But Eric was still a good chess piece, his stubbornness and madness could perfectly bear many necessary things for Yifeng. Go, continue your plan. Go and unleash the surge of the extraordinary. Yifeng withdrew his hand, his voice gentle but irresistible. Eric respectfully bowed his head, then turned and flew away, disappearing into the vast sea. Yifeng stood alone on the ice field, looking at the departing shadow of the other party, his eyes deep. Everything had just begun. Watching Magneto's figure turn into a small dot in the sky and finally disappear completely, Yifeng slowly withdrew his gaze and turned to fly towards the direction of the church. The sea breeze brushed his white robe, and the ice field silently melted after he left, as if nothing had happened. Inside the church courtyard, Logan was leaning against a stone pillar, resting with his eyes closed. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, his keen senses catching an unusual elemental fluctuation. It was at this moment that Yifeng silently landed in front of him. What happened? Logan asked with a frown, subconsciously tensing his muscles. Although his enhanced perception was vague, he still detected the short but intense skirmish in the distance. During this time, Logan had remained at the church. On one hand, it was to cooperate with Anna's training in ability control. On the other hand, he voluntarily became her sparring partner while also receiving guidance from Yifeng. Get ready. Our revolution is about to begin. Yifeng's tone was calm, yet carried an undeniable weight. Logan's eyes sharpened, and he stood up straight. Yifeng continued, Magneto just exchanged blows with me on the sea. He was still after Anna. Although I repelled him, he will never give up his ambition. He paused briefly, his voice growing more serious. A great war concerning the future of mutants and humans will likely soon begin. Yifeng did not tell Logan that Eric had become his puppet. Some paths must be walked by someone, some blood must be shed by someone. Eric was already someone who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, and Yifeng felt little guilt towards him. The path of revolution never lacked sacrifice, and Magneto's sacrifice, in Yifeng's opinion, was completely worth it. That old guy, Logan snorted coldly. He had long heard of Magneto's reputation. A fanatic who claimed to fight for mutant survival but acted extremely and unscrupulously. Just the two of us. Logan glanced at Clarice, Anna, and others who were still training in the distance. Clarice, Anna, you, and Savis will all participate. Yi Feng answered clearly. It's also time for your identity to be revealed. Walking the world as a member of the Saint Seiya Legion will make it easier to recruit others in the future. Yi Feng never intended to keep Logan and Xiao Taoqi hidden in the church indefinitely. Having chosen this path, they were destined to face the entire world. Looking at the bigger picture, the mutant problem was merely the tip of the iceberg. This world, though without the Avengers, was far more complex, hiding many more unknown crises. Logan nodded, without a trace of hesitation in his eyes. He had long been prepared. In the coming time, I will fully assist you in comprehending the cosmos. Yi Feng looked at him. Once you successfully ignite your cosmos, the number of mutants on Earth who can surpass you will be few and far between, unless you encounter an Omega level. He had great confidence in Logan. His powerful physical talent and tenacious will far surpassed ordinary people, and he was just one step away from igniting his cosmos. In the following days, Logan entered a veritable, hellish training. Every day, he was pushed to his limits by Yi Feng's storm-like attacks, repeatedly knocked down, and repeatedly stood up again relying on his healing factor. But he could clearly feel the changes in his body, speed, strength, and reactions all comprehensively improved. Eventually, Yi Feng even withdrew the earth element blessing he had previously given, demanding that Logan endure the attacks entirely on his own. Boom. On the third day of training, Logan was once again sent flying by a punch, crashing heavily into the ground. But he almost instantly flipped up, ignoring the blood at the corner of his mouth, and sharply dodged to the side. The next moment, his original position was covered by countless shadow fists. Yi Feng's attacks were like a fierce storm, his punches and kicks reaching near supersonic speeds. Logan could only desperately dodge and block with his beast-like intuition. All his bones, muscles, and even internal organs were constantly being damaged, then instantly repaired and strengthened by his healing factor. The few people watching from the sidelines were terrified. This training method was incredibly brutal. Even knowing Logan couldn't die, it was still unbearable to watch. Suddenly, Yi Feng's sky-filling shadow fists abruptly stopped. Immediately after, the entire training ground seemed to be enveloped by a miniature starry sky, with starlight flowing, dreamlike and ethereal. It's finally done, Yi Feng smiled faintly. Next, it was time to wait for Logan to sense his guardian constellation. Without the pressure of attacks, Logan's injuries rapidly healed. He stood still, his body gradually enveloped by brilliant starlight, and a vast stellar panorama slowly unfolded behind him. Is this the power of the cosmos? Clarice and the others gazed at this miraculous sight, their eyes captivated, as if they too had touched that profound threshold. Logan's body was undergoing a complete transformation. His internal organs and the light of his soul resonated with each other, and the external starlight continuously poured into his body. Finally, a magnificent star chart completely solidified behind him. It's Taurus. Clarice recognized the shining star chart at a glance. One of the 12 zodiac signs, Taurus. Which means, Logan will become the first gold Saint Seiya of the Church's Saint Seiya Legion. Savis murmured, his tone tinged with envy. Everyone held their breath. They had long understood the Saint Seiya's ranking system. The gold Saint Seiya, representing the 12 zodiac signs, were undoubtedly the peak combat power among the Saint Seiya. Just then, Yi Feng also noticed a subtle fluctuation in his own cosmos. A pure power feedback into his body, increasing his cultivation speed slightly. It really works, he understood in his heart. If Kronos, the god of time, was generating capital from capital, then what he was doing now was the path of co-creation and co-sharing. This discovery validated his previous hypothesis. By cultivating his own Saint Seiya, he too could continuously grow stronger. At this moment, Logan was immersed in the combat techniques inherited from Taurus. These exquisite and powerful moves, combined with the explosive power of the cosmos, would unleash unimaginable might. When the sixth sense cosmos completely stabilized, Logan opened his eyes. He felt the surging power within him, as if he had been reborn. Have you awakened any new superpowers? Yi Feng asked. I suppose so. My healing factor is several times stronger than before, and now all the bones in my body can extend out at will as weapons. And Logan savored the feeling for a moment before answering. He raised his hand, and a bone claw instantly shot out from between his fingers, gleaming with a metallic cold light the next second. My bones seem to have gained the ability to metallize. Logan couldn't believe that merely awakening the sixth sense had brought such earth-shattering changes. He was now many times stronger than he had been just minutes before. Yi Feng watched the energy fluctuations around Logan gradually subside and nodded in satisfaction. Since you've already grasped the power of the cosmos, the training of these people will be entrusted to you. He spoke, his voice echoing through the training ground. Yi Feng spoke decisively and without hesitation. His previous efforts to help Logan comprehend the cosmos were precisely for this moment. To find a reliable coach who could share the workload. At least for laying the foundation, Logan, in the early stages of the sixth sense, was fully capable of serving as a coach. After explaining the training matters, Yi Feng turned and left. As he walked through the church corridor, his mind raced. It's time to put Saint Cloth on the agenda. The Saint Cloth, a concept originating from the Saint Seiya world, was an extraordinary armor crafted by Athena to combat the gods. She commissioned Hephaestus, the god of fire and forging, to lead the alchemists of the continent of Mu in creating it, modeled after divine raiment. The initial Saint Cloth was immensely powerful, even comparable to true divine raiment, making the first generation of Saint Seiya so formidable that they caused the gods to be wary. Because of this, the gods removed the gems from the Saint Cloth, greatly weakening its power and downgrading it into 3 levels: gold, silver, and bronze. The materials for crafting Saint Cloth were not complicated. Regardless of the Saint Cloth's level, 3 basic materials were always required, differing only in their proportions: orichalcum, gominium, and stardust sand. Orichalcum, also known as adamantium. In the Marvel universe, it has a more widely known name: vibranium. Although it cannot be confirmed whether they originate from the same source, their characteristics are extremely similar, possessing extremely high hardness, impossible for ordinary beings to destroy, and extremely high melting and freezing points, making it an extremely stable supermetal. Yi Feng was not worried about not finding this material. The most crucial are the other 2 materials. Stardust sand, whose specific composition is unknown, possesses super strong cosmos energy conductivity and convergence. Simply put, it is a perfect superconducting material, capable of transmitting the power of a Saint Seiya without loss, and even possessing amplification and protective effects, allowing a Saint Seiya to deal higher damage with less consumption. Stardust sand also has the properties of a memory metal, capable of self-repair. Such metals have different names in different worlds, but substitutes can always be found. For example, Uru metal, used to forge artifacts in the 9 realms, is a good alternative, possessing both extremely high energy conductivity and astonishing hardness. What bothered Yi Feng the most was gominium. This material is a perfect fusion agent, capable of perfectly combining the hardness of orichalcum with the energy conductivity, amplification, and self-repairing properties of stardust sand, thereby creating a Saint Cloth that integrates defense, amplification, and self-repair. 3 materials, none of which can be missing. Orichalcum and stardust sand were manageable, Yi Feng could find substitutes. But for the properties and efficacy of gominium, he still hadn't thought of any Marvel Universe material that could serve as a substitute. It seems I can't be too ambitious, Yi Feng mused with a frown. It's not very realistic to perfectly replicate Saint Cloth in this world. After all, some materials are limited by the rules of the world. Thinking of this, he decided to first find a way to create substitutes. Currently on Earth, vibranium is confirmed to exist, but it's unclear whether it's specifically in Wakanda or Atlantis. In the original work, the adamantium later injected into Logan evolved from vibranium. Even in Japan, there were conglomerates that used adamantium to forge armor, attempting to seize Logan's healing factor and immortality. This time, when dealing with Magneto's incident, I can take the opportunity to deal with the Rockefeller family as well. Yi Feng secretly calculated. Vibranium, a rare metal, is priceless, and the income of the church alone simply cannot afford it. He recalled the financial backer behind the previous laboratory. The trade he proposed last time has yet to receive a response. However, Yifeng was not in a hurry. After Eric's actions this time, with the exposure of supernatural powers, the church's status would inevitably rise. By then, he would have plenty of time to contend with those high and mighty figures. Perhaps I should find an opportunity to meet the Sorcerer Supreme. Yifeng then thought of Ancient One. This grand sorcerer, who has guarded Earth for centuries, has traveled through various dimensions and possesses vast knowledge. Materials he hadn't heard of, Ancient One might not be unaware of. After determining the basic policy for crafting Saint Cloth, Yifeng no longer agonized over it and instead began to meditate, sensing the growth of his cosmos during this period. Time passed quietly. Outside, the training proceeded in an orderly fashion under Logan's guidance, and Magneto, controlled by Yifeng's illusion demon Emperor Fist, also acted according to plan. The X-Men, aware of the Brotherhood's movements, were urgently discussing plans to stop Magneto. 2 days later, Logan's hurried footsteps interrupted Yifeng's meditation. Yifeng, something's happened. Yifeng pushed open the door of the meditation room and slowly walked out. 2 days of cultivation had brought him considerable gains. Having broken through the early stage of the sixth sense less than half a year ago, he had already touched the barrier to the middle stage. He believed it wouldn't be long before he officially entered the middle stage of the sixth sense. By then, he was confident he could contend with Skyfather-level powerhouses like Dracula. With the power of the cosmos, even if human high-level officials developed potions or food targeting mutants, he would not be afraid. After all, the black technology of the Marvel Universe sometimes truly defies logic. What is it? Yifeng asked calmly. Check the news. Logan pointed to the television screen in the hall. Yifeng looked up. The screen was urgently broadcasting breaking news. A senator had suddenly mutated during a public speech, becoming a mutant. The crowd in the footage was in a panic, and reporters scrambled to cover the shocking news. It seems Eric has already begun his actions. A hint of a smile flashed in Yifeng's eyes. This was the first time supernatural power had been so openly exposed to the world. Get ready, the revolution is about to begin. This is the first step for the church to ascend to the altar. Yifeng's voice carried an undeniable firmness. This news was like a giant stone thrown into a calm lake, instantly stirring up 1,000 ripples. The existence of mutants could no longer be concealed, completely exposed to the world. Countless ordinary people suddenly realized that such a group of super-powered individuals had always been hidden among them, and their abilities were extremely unstable, capable of causing immense destruction at any time. At the same time, inside the Mutant Academy, Professor Charles watched the television news and let out a heavy sigh. For so many years, he had often used his abilities to erase memories of destruction caused by mutants, fighting for their survival space. However, this time, under Yifeng's instructions and Eric's radical actions, the existence of mutants was completely revealed to the public. Professor Jean Grey and Scott, standing behind him, both frowned deeply. We must stop Eric. Charles's voice was heavy and resolute. His machine is extremely unstable. Although that senator was transformed, there are clear severe after effects that haven't fully manifested yet. I can feel his mental power constantly diminishing. He has less than a month left to live at most. Charles's tone was very firm. The three factions all set their sights on New York City. The Vatican even formally submitted an entry application for the Saint Seiya Legion to the U.S. government. The Vatican's Saint Seiya Legion, applying for entry. Only 5 people. What exactly do they want to do? At a high-level U.S. meeting, several officials looked at the entry information submitted by the Vatican, their expressions shifting between cloudy and clear, and a tense atmosphere filled the conference room. It's probably for Senator Jensen's mutant incident. The Vatican's Saint Seiya Legion is essentially an armed force composed of mutants. A middle-aged man in a military uniform said in a deep voice. What Magneto did this time will completely destroy the image of mutants in the public eye. If the first large-scale exposure appears in the form of terrorists, even for Yifeng and the Vatican, it will be difficult to salvage their reputation. Mentioning Magneto, everyone present felt a headache. This meeting could not be postponed. once postponed, it would mean compromising with mutant forces. They had already contacted Professor X Charles, hoping that he could stop this crisis. Now, with the Vatican suddenly getting involved, it made them feel the matter was even more thorny. Yi Feng's name was already extremely well known in the underground world and widely circulated in high-level circles. Especially his transactions regarding immortality and rejuvenation, which made countless capital magnates flock to him. If it weren't for their apprehension about his and the Vatican's growing influence, this deal would probably have been struck long ago. So, now, do we approve it? Approve it. Compared to the Brotherhood of Mutants, the Vatican is at least the more trustworthy party. Finally, a high-ranking official sighed, a bunch of indecisive bureaucrats. After receiving the U.S. government's approval, a hint of displeasure flashed in the Pope's eyes within the Vatican. It took a full day from application to approval, which clearly indicated delay and vigilance towards the Vatican. He deeply understood the human leadership's apprehension towards mutants, but as the Pope, he knew too many unknown secrets of this world. In his view, the existence of mutants was definitely more beneficial than harmful to the human race. It's just a pity that those people would never understand. He didn't dwell on it further and quickly relayed the message to Yi Feng. Yi Feng, accompanied by Logan, Clarice, and 4 other Saint Seiya, boarded a special plane bound for the U.S. The plane pierced through the clouds, its fuselage trembling slightly. Clarice excitedly glanced out the window, then turned to Yi Feng and asked, "Your Eminence, what is the scope of our mission this time?" "There is no scope," Yi Feng replied calmly. "The mutants who attack you are all enemies. But you cannot actively or openly attack ordinary people. We are representing the Vatican on this trip, we must display the Vatican's authority and light." He paused, then continued, "Moreover, we may not need to directly intervene in frontal conflicts." Of course, this was only for the other 4. Under the influence of the illusionary demon Emperor Fist, Magneto's mind had already deviated from the norm, taking on a hint of desperate madness. With his abilities, if he unleashed them without reservation, dismantling the entire New York City would only be a matter of minutes. Unless, the entity in Jean Grey's subconscious awakened, and the Dark Phoenix took over her body, otherwise, probably no one could truly stop Magneto. And Yi Feng's trip, in addition to dealing with Magneto, had another goal. The teenager who appeared in X-Men 3, his ability was to neutralize the powers of all other mutants. Although it seemed to be only a temporary suppression, Yi Feng was very curious whether this ability could even affect Omega-level mutants. On the other side, members of the Brotherhood of Mutants had already moved large equipment to the top of New York City's tallest building. They needed to ensure that the energy released by the device could cover the entire city. "Eric, are you really sure?" Mystique Raven walked up to Magneto, her voice laced with unconcealed worry. "Don't worry, Raven." Magneto's tone was normal, showing no ripples. "Everything is under control." No one noticed the fleeting distortion and madness in his eyes, even the Vatican has gotten involved. At the X-Mansion, Charles slowly put down the documents in his hand. As the strongest telepath of his time, he could capture some high-level decisions and secret intelligence even without the aid of Cerebro. The Vatican's entry application, the U.S. government's approval, and even the greed of some financial magnates for Yi Feng's immortality deal, he was fully aware of it all. He hadn't expected Yi Feng to actively get involved in the disputes between mutants. It's not surprising either. After all, the recent shift in public opinion regarding mutants was almost entirely driven by him. Charles murmured to himself. Just then, Storm Aurora knocked and entered. "Professor, the plane is ready. Let's go. We cannot let Eric succeed." Charles steered his wheelchair towards the door, his expression grave. The Vatican's private jet landed smoothly at New York Airport. Yi Feng and his 4 companions walked down the gangway, all uniformly dressed in the Vatican's specially made silver-white combat suits, which shimmered with a cold luster in the sunlight, immediately drawing the attention of everyone present. "Your Eminence." The head of the New York Diocese was already respectfully waiting by the tarmac. Currently, Yi Feng enjoys extremely high prestige within the Vatican. Almost all clergy know that he has successfully handled several supernatural incidents with decisive methods and remarkable results, which has also rekindled the faith of countless believers in the Vatican. The group boarded a special car, and the city scenery outside the window rapidly receded. Have you tracked Magneto's whereabouts? Yi Feng asked, flipping through the documents in his hand without lifting his head. It has been located, Your Eminence. Magneto entered New York through special channels, and a large number of Brotherhood members have also gathered. Send out the notice. Yi Feng closed the documents, his gaze sweeping towards the person in charge. All clergy and related families in the New York diocese are to evacuate within 24 hours, with expenses covered by the Vatican. Try not to stay in New York. The person in charge's heart tightened, and he immediately nodded. Yes, Your Eminence. He knew that Yi Feng never spoke idly. This could only mean that New York was about to face a disaster capable of engulfing the entire city. Is the situation really that serious? Logan, beside him, frowned, his voice low. Possibly even more serious. This time, what we face, might be a Magneto who would not hesitate to overturn the entire city. Yi Feng looked at the towering buildings outside the car window, his voice showing no fluctuation. The emergence of the extraordinary is bound to be accompanied by panic and turmoil. Although the high-level officials of various countries know that mutants are terrifying, they have not truly understood the scale of this terrifying nature. And what Yi Feng wants to do is to display his prowess through Eric's actions and establish the Vatican's and Saint Seiya's authority and fame. This move is called combining grace with power. And he is the shadow player behind the scenes. A day passed quickly, and the personnel from the Holy See had almost completely withdrawn. Yi Feng stood still, his spiritual perception spreading out like an invisible tide, clearly detecting the X-Men members rapidly approaching. A barely perceptible arc curved at the corner of his mouth, and a mental suggestion he had planted earlier was quietly triggered. Eric, who was in the midst of planning, suddenly froze, and a strange red light flashed across his eyes. The last vestiges of hesitation and strategizing were instantly replaced by a fervent impulse. He no longer hesitated, resolutely leading all members of the Brotherhood of Mutants, marching grandly towards the already prepared venue. The highest point of New York City, the top floor hall of a skyscraper. The hall was filled with peculiar metallic devices, arranged according to some arcane pattern, with a raised platform in the center. Eric slowly stepped onto the platform, and the metal hummed softly at his will, as if worshipping their king. He spread his arms, and a powerful magnetic field surged around him, making the air seem thick and electrified. Today is the day. Eric's voice, amplified by the surrounding metal resonance, echoed through the empty hall, filled with a martyr-like madness and determination. The great revival of mutants will be personally initiated by me. We will wash away the long-standing humiliation and restore our ancient glory of dominating the world. His previous conversation with Yi Feng, the latter's contemptuous taunt, had deeply stung him. Afterwards, Eric almost obsessively consulted countless lost ancient texts and secret histories. He discovered that the historical origin of mutants was indeed obscure, but in the fragmented mythological records, mutants were once revered as deities, legends walking among humans. And now, they hid in the shadows like rats, hunted and experimented upon. A strong sense of humiliation, intertwined with the extreme emotions catalyzed by Yi Feng's mental suggestion, pushed him completely to the brink of madness. Rumble. Without warning, the entire New York City began to tremble violently. As if a giant beast sleeping deep underground was awakening. Streets cracked, skyscrapers swayed, and countless car alarms blared piercingly. The metallic elements embedded in the city's foundations and reinforced concrete seemed to be called, beginning to stir uneasily and twist. It's an earthquake. Run. God. What's happening? Pedestrians on the street panicked, fleeing in all directions, and fear spread throughout the city like a plague. Charles's face suddenly turned incredibly grim. His powerful telepathic abilities allowed him to feel the city's suffering, and even more clearly, to pinpoint the familiar yet alien, incredibly violent source of magnetic energy. Eric, he's insane. Charles's voice carried an unbelievable shock and sorrow. While he used to be radical, he would never. This is completely pushing mutants to be the absolute enemies of humanity, leaving no room for compromise. His mind immediately connected to all X-Men members. He's on the top floor of the tallest building in New York. We must stop him. Immediately. In his desperation, Charles tried to connect to another familiar mind. Raven. Answer me. Do you know the consequences of doing this? Stop Eric now. After a moment of silence, Raven's voice echoed in his mind, but it also carried a sense of desperate resolve. It's too late, Charles. Eric, he's gambled everything. Either mutants rise today and stand at the pinnacle of the world, or all of us will turn to ash and be buried with this city. Her voice showed no trace of retreat, only the desperate madness of being infected by Eric's fervent belief. The members of the Brotherhood of Mutants gathered around the device, their faces glowing with a pilgrimage-like fervor, as if they had already witnessed the dawn of a new world. Meanwhile, in an underground bunker somewhere in Washington, D.C. Immediately enter the highest-level safe room. The U.S. high-ranking officials were in chaos, the tragic images of New York on the screens making their faces turn pale. They had anticipated the threat of mutants, but they had never imagined that Magneto would truly dare to tear off all pretenses and directly use an entire world-class metropolis as leverage. If New York were destroyed, global fear of the fragility of human civilization and the recognition of the mutant threat would be pushed to the extreme. At that time, any form of coexistence would become a pipe dream. What alarmed them even more was that the tremendous power Magneto displayed, capable of shaking the Earth's crust and manipulating a city, had already exceeded their understanding of mutant abilities. In a highly confidential laboratory, Dr. Bolivar Trask sat in a wheelchair, looking up at the earth-shattering scene on the screen. His eyes, however, gleamed with an almost devout fanaticism. What magnificent power! This power should only belong to God, to the divine. It should never be wielded by mortals, especially not by mutants, such an alien race. And far away in another military base, Colonel William Stryker also watched the surveillance footage with a grim face. The alloy fortress he prided himself on, claimed to resist any mutant attack, seemed so ridiculous and vulnerable in the face of Magneto's world-altering power. Because its main constituent material was metal, Your Excellency, should we really not intervene? Clarice, feeling the continuous tremors beneath her feet and the unsettling energy fluctuations from the distant sky, couldn't help but ask Yi Feng, who stood motionless beside her. The entire city was crying, countless civilians were fleeing in despair. Yi Feng's gaze was profound. He calmly swept over the chaotic street scene and slowly said, Logan, go immediately to support the X-Men and try your best to stop Eric. The rest of you, come with me and do your best to evacuate and rescue the innocent people of this city. Although Logan's strength had greatly increased, facing Eric at full power, possessing almost godlike might, he was still not enough. Eric's powerful magnetic shield, coupled with his specially made insulated helmet, made him almost immune to all mind control and physical assaults. This was almost a dead end. Unless the Phoenix Force within Jean completely went berserk, or he himself personally intervened. So Yi Feng was not worried that the scene wouldn't be grand enough. All right. Logan didn't hesitate for a moment. He had absolute trust in Yi Feng's judgment and commands. He knew that Yi Feng possessed healing power, and Clarice's spatial teleportation could maximize civilian rescue efforts. He let out a low growl, his legs pushing off with force, instantly cracking and exploding the concrete ground beneath him. He shot into the sky like a cannonball, tearing through the air with a sonic boom, and sped towards the battlefield at the pinnacle of New York. At the heart of the battlefield, the Brotherhood of Mutants and the X-Men were already engaged in close combat. Storm Aurora hovered in midair, her eyes completely white, wielding the power of nature. Thunderclouds rolled across the sky, and thick lightning bolts danced like silver serpents, striking down repeatedly, attempting to clear the path to Eric, but they were either nullified by the agile Brotherhood of Mutants members' abilities or avoided by using the terrain. Cyclops Scott stood at a high vantage point, precisely controlling the energy output of his ruby quartz visor. Thick red impact beams swept across the battlefield, melting and piercing through metal obstacles. However, these were also painstakingly blocked by mutants in the opposing camp who possessed defensive or reflective abilities. Beast Hank let out an angry roar, weaving through the chaotic battlefield with agility that belied his massive form. His claws and strength sent charging Brotherhood of Mutants members flying, but more people fearlessly filled the gaps. The Brotherhood of Mutants members also possessed diverse abilities, unleashing their full power. Manipulating energy, altering terrain, moving at high speed, mental interference. Relying on their fanatical beliefs and numerical advantage, they fiercely resisted the X-Men's advance, and the battle devolved into a cruel stalemate. Professor We can't hesitate any longer. Jean Grey's voice, filled with urgency, echoed in Charles's mind. She could feel the energy Eric was gathering becoming increasingly terrifying. If they delayed any longer, everything would be irreversible. Charles closed his eyes in pain. He knew what this meant. The next moment, he held nothing back, and powerful psychic energy surged out like a tsunami. Alas! A long and heavy sigh seemed to resonate in the heart of every mutant. In an instant, across the entire battlefield, all Brotherhood of Mutants members, except for Eric who was protected by his helmet, froze. Their expressions were fixed on their faces, their bodies maintaining their previous actions, as if a pause button had been pressed, and time had stopped flowing for them. This was one of Professor X's most powerful crowd control abilities. Mental stasis. The Brotherhood of Mutants members, deprived of their ability to move, immediately became living targets. Many perished in the subsequent attacks, and the balance of the battlefield suddenly tilted. Quick! Stop Eric! Charles's voice rang out again in the X-Men members' minds, filled with exhaustion and urgency. His telepathy couldn't penetrate that fooled helmet to pinpoint Eric. Now all hope rested on his companions. They had to stop Eric before he completed that destructive ritual. But when the X-Men members truly charged forward, they understood what despair meant. A powerful, almost insurmountable magnetic field enveloped Eric within a 5-meter radius. Anyone who tried to approach was mercilessly repelled. Get out of the way. Storm Aurora's eyes turned white again, and she summoned heavenly thunder. Several thick lightning bolts tore through the sky, crashing down, even penetrating the roofs and bulletproof glass of skyscrapers. Yet, they still couldn't shake that magnetic barrier. What should we do? The physically oriented mutants were even more helpless. Their physical attacks were completely repelled by the magnetic field, and they themselves were left with churning chi and blood. The structure of the entire New York City was beginning to collapse, centered around Eric. The skyscraper beneath their feet was already riddled with holes, and after this impact, it finally began to collapse from the top floor. Countless metal fragments detached from the building, drawn by an invisible force, swirling and circling around Eric, creating a doomsday-like scene. What a doomsday-like scene! Charles looked up from the unstable ground, his eyes filled with powerlessness. He couldn't find any way to stop Eric for a moment. Even more terrifying, the dreadful magnetic field fluctuations were rapidly spreading, tearing and disintegrating buildings one after another. Before long, even his current position would be completely swallowed. He could only exert all his strength to buy time with his psychic power. Boom! Just then, a sonic boom ripped through the sky. A figure plummeted from high altitude like a cannonball, abruptly hovering just 1 meter above the ground. The wind pressure carved a crater into the ground, and dust billowed. The newcomer was Logan. He made his entrance in such a nearly barbaric fashion that even Charles couldn't help but gape. Why are you alone? Where are the others? Logan surveyed his surroundings. The situation had deteriorated to an extreme degree. Although most of the Brotherhood of Mutants members were still paralyzed, the continuously expanding magnetic field was already approaching Charles's position. Any later, and Professor X might perish here. The X-Men have already gone in to stop Eric. No sooner had Charles finished speaking than the entire remaining building completely disintegrated with a crash. Rubble and rebar rained down, and members who had lost their ability to fly plummeted, including Charles himself. Go! In the nick of time, Logan suddenly stepped forward. At this moment, he had regained Yi Feng's Earth Element blessing. The ground beneath his feet suddenly rippled, and Charles's seat shifted with it, narrowly avoiding the falling boulders. At the same time, Charles released his mental suppression on the Brotherhood of Mutants members. The mutants, regaining their mobility, scattered in panic, desperately seeking cover amidst the constantly collapsing urban ruins. Countless metal and architectural debris swirled upwards, circling Eric, who floated in the air like subjects. At this moment, he was like a deity descended upon the world, looking down indifferently at the insignificant masses. The energy conversion device beneath his feet continuously hummed, and the charging indicator rapidly climbed. Not enough. It's far from enough. To cover the entire New York City metropolitan area, I need even stronger power. Eric muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the energy readings. The earth cracked, buildings toppled, and the expansion of the magnetic field suddenly accelerated. A torrent of metal obscured the sky, and doomsday seemed to be at hand. You're doing quite well. In the distant sky, Yi Feng stood quietly, watching the metal frenzy that swept across heaven and earth, a faint smile playing on his lips. But it was not yet his time to act. His mission was to save people. On the ground, countless civilians wailed and fled amidst the ruins and tremors, their blood staining the streets. Just as they were about to fall into despair, a dazzling golden light suddenly bloomed in the sky. A huge and complex golden array appeared high in the air, sacred and majestic. Holy light rain of purification. The book in Yi Feng's hand floated in the air, moving without wind, channeling energy into the array above. Abundant light power quickly condensed, transforming into warm light rain, sprinkling upon the scarred earth. The fleeing people were shocked to find that their wounds were rapidly healing in the light rain. Everyone, I am Yi Feng, the leader of the Saint Seiya Legion of the Church. His voice was calm yet extremely penetrating, echoing in every corner of New York. Those who do not wish to die, please enter behind the light barrier. That will be your sanctuary. As he spoke, a massive golden light barrier shot up from behind him, like a miracle, demarcating a safe zone. He had specifically set up the light barrier in front of the Rockefeller family building. This area would henceforth be the property of the church. If it were completely destroyed, rebuilding it would cost a lot of money. People awoke as if from a dream, desperately surging towards the light barrier. How can this old man be so strong? Logan looked up at the sky, seeing a torrent of countless metal fragments obscuring the sun, like the end of the world descending. A hint of shock flashed in his eyes. He had long known that Eric and Charles were very strong, being the two giants in the mutant world, dominating for decades with illustrious reputations. How could they be weak? But the sight before him, like a natural disaster, still made his heart tremble. Before comprehending the cosmos, he was definitely no match for Eric. But now, he felt that he might not be without the power to fight. That sudden light barrier, did Yi Feng make a move? Charles sat in his wheelchair, looking at the golden barrier that isolated the entire battlefield, and asked in a low voice. That's right, it's His Eminence's power. Logan maintained his respect for Yi Feng in front of outsiders, referring to him as His Eminence. Although Eric is formidable, he is still no match for His Eminence. Just a week ago, he was repelled by His Eminence on the sea. We can't waste any more time, everyone move aside. Logan roared sternly, his gaze sweeping over the Brotherhood of Mutants members surrounding Magneto. Even though Yi Feng had marked out the battlefield with a light barrier, the current situation was still incredibly tricky. Boom! Logan stomped his feet fiercely, and the earth trembled. The blessing of earth elements and the cosmos erupted simultaneously, and the Taurus constellation vaguely appeared behind him. Although I've only recently inherited this power, it's enough to deal with you all. Titan Nova. Rumble. With the enhancement of earth element power, the entire ground was ripped up by Logan, smashing towards Magneto like a meteorite. Is this, the Saint Seiya of the papacy? All those watching were dumbfounded. To overturn the earth with a wave of a hand, such immense power made their hearts run cold. Logan was not yet proficient with this move, but with the earth element's enhancement, he managed to unleash it. The giant rocks soared into the sky, rushing straight towards Eric. Stop him. Don't let him interfere with Magneto's plan. The Brotherhood of Mutants members desperately tried to block him, each displaying their abilities. Explosions rang out continuously, and the giant rocks thrown by Logan were quickly shattered. But Logan didn't care at all. He had already leapt into midair, his cosmos burning, his fists covered in bone to increase their hardness, and he charged straight into Magneto's magnetic field barrier like a meteor. Boom! The magnetic field barrier twisted violently, rippling. Is that you? Logan. Eric recognized him. The two had met once years ago, and there were often reports of Logan being active in the underground world. But according to the information he had, Logan shouldn't be this strong. Although his subconscious was influenced by Yi Feng, this did not hinder Eric's own logical thinking. Get lost! Eric roared. In an instant, the sky-obscuring metal torrent seemed to receive an order, changing direction and surging towards Logan. Logan's expression changed. He didn't want to be torn apart by these metals. Even if he could heal, that feeling would be absolutely unbearable. The moment he was repelled by the magnetic field, he crossed his arms, employing the Taurus's offensive and defensive combat technique. His internal bones rapidly covered his body, enveloping him like living armor, with a faint golden glow circulating. Whoosh! The next moment, Logan was completely swallowed by the metal torrent, smashing heavily to the ground from high in the sky. Rumble! The earth trembled, and cracks spread like a spiderweb. The ground within several miles was completely destroyed. The force of this blow was unimaginable. Logan. Charles's expression changed dramatically. He dared not imagine how furious the papacy's divine emissary would be if Logan died here. As it stood, the power Yi Feng wielded was definitely far beyond anyone present. Charles subconsciously looked at Jean Grey beside him. No matter who it is. No one will stop me. Eric's voice was cold. Under his control, the metal torrent converged into a several dozen meter tall steel giant, whose fists hammered the ground like a rainstorm. Boom! 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 The impacts grew louder and louder, the battlefield was filled with smoke and dust, and what was once the most prosperous area of New York had been completely reduced to ruins, with not a single intact building remaining. Great Horn. Moo! A massive bull, condensed from golden light, suddenly burst out from underground, shattering the steel giant's arms. Logan leapt out of the ruins. He was not in good shape. The bones covering his body were completely shattered, with only a few fragments remaining, his clothes were tattered, and he was covered in blood. It was only thanks to his super healing ability, anyone else would have been beaten to death. This old man, for the first time, Logan clearly realized how terrifying a strong individual standing at the pinnacle of mutants truly was. In such a battlefield, outsiders simply couldn't intervene. Even the X-Men could only barely protect themselves from the aftershocks. Professor, if this continues, we'll all be shaken to death. Storm said with difficulty, and the other X-Men members were also struggling to hold on. Although their mutant abilities were powerful, their physical bodies were very weak, which was a fatal weakness for most mutants. Colossus's physical body was strong enough, but he dared not use his ability, otherwise, he would become Eric's weapon in the next moment. Retreat to the edge of the barrier. Charles's expression was solemn as he reluctantly gave the order. He and Eric had known each other for decades, and he had never seen Eric so insane. Coupled with that special helmet, even his telepathy couldn't penetrate it. Has the balance I've always insisted on been wrong? Charles's heart wavered, especially after witnessing the power Logan displayed. He vaguely felt that Yi Feng might possess a method to help mutants perfect and control their abilities. Although it was just a guess, he had this premonition. The Brotherhood of Mutants members were not foolish either, they all retreated to the edge of the barrier. Annoying ants. Impatience flashed in Eric's eyes. Under his control, the metal torrent continuously compressed, its density becoming extremely high, and its weight skyrocketing. He wanted to use this specially made metal cage to completely seal Logan. This will be your exclusive prison. Eric's eyes sharpened. Several metal arms suddenly burst out from the ground beneath Logan's feet, firmly locking his legs in place. Clang! 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 Metal collision sounds rang out one after another, and Logan was tightly confined in place by Magneto with high-density metal. Logan's face changed dramatically. He struggled desperately, and the metal trapping him began to twist and deform, but he couldn't break free for a while. It's over. The X-Men who saw this scene from afar felt their hearts sink simultaneously. Even Logan was suppressed. Did they really still have a chance to win? Only Charles remained calm. He looked up at the sky and said loudly, "Your Eminence Yi Feng, are you still going to stand by and watch? Once Eric succeeds, everything will be irreversible." Charles's voice, carried by mental waves, spread throughout the entire battlefield, and everyone heard it clearly. Buzz. The two sides of the barrier quietly parted, and Yi Feng, stepping on a golden light formation, slowly descended from the sky. His entrance was like a deity descending, each step carrying a suffocating sense of oppression. That is the divine envoy openly acknowledged by the Catholic Church. The current commander of the Saint Seiya Legion, Yi Feng. Many mutants had heard Yi Feng's name before, but very few had actually seen his true face. Now, seeing him with their own eyes, they understood that the rumors were not only not exaggerated, but even understated. It won't be long, he might really become the Pope of the Vatican. Someone muttered in a low voice, with an undisguised shock in his tone. Yi Feng's appearance and temperament, once seen, were hard to forget. He was too dazzling, almost fitting all of humanity's imagination of a god. It wasn't just the people on the battlefield who were watching him. This shocking conflict that erupted in New York had already spread across the entire world through live broadcasts from various media outlets. Magneto's manipulation of the metal torrent, which obscured the sky, made everyone understand why he was wanted by over a dozen countries yet still remained at large. This level of power was simply impossible to contend with by conventional means. Most modern weapons rely on metal components, making them virtually useless in front of Magneto. Let's all discuss it. What do you think? High-ranking officials from various countries urgently convened meetings, closely monitoring this sudden unrest. With Eric causing such a commotion, the existence of mutants could no longer be concealed. Once ordinary citizens discovered that so many superpowered individuals were lurking around them, potentially endangering their own safety, it would inevitably trigger widespread panic and unrest. People would demand explanations and the truth from the government. And if Yi Feng could quell this unrest, the Catholic Church would undoubtedly become the biggest winner. He might even leverage this prestige to ascend to the position of Pope. A pope capable of displaying miracles was an irresistible temptation for the Catholic Church. Their previous failure to reach a deal with Yi Feng was precisely due to this concern. However, given the current situation, Yi Feng's rise was unstoppable. He descended upon New York on golden light, saving the populace from distress. The rain of light he brought not only healed external injuries but also purified their bodies. After this incident, the Catholic Church's prestige would reach an unprecedented global peak, potentially even overshadowing the panic caused by Magneto. We can't stop him. Throughout the entire unrest, the government and military had almost no presence and made no contributions. It was all up to the X-Men and the Catholic Church's Saint Seiya to fight bitterly. The only thing we can do now is to try and control the negative impact of this incident. It would be best to use this opportunity to push the mutant threat theory. We must firmly curb the rise of mutants. A cold light flashed in the eyes of a high-ranking official, as he spoke in a frigid tone. Mutants must never be allowed to lord over ordinary humans. This was the unspoken consensus among governments worldwide, and an unbreakable bottom line. However, the calculations of these politicians were unknown to those on the battlefield, and ordinary citizens would also not know. All they could see was the battle before them. Yi Feng slightly raised his eyes, and his lips parted. Divine words, understood by no one, echoed in everyone's ears, clear and majestic. Those with good intentions felt as if they were baptized, their souls illuminated by pure light, while those with evil intentions felt a heavy blow, their minds dazed, almost unable to stand steady. At the same time, the massive magic array covering the sky suddenly burst into light, painting the entire New York City sky a brilliant gold. Rings of dazzling light began to fall downwards. Buzz. 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 In an instant, several light rings fell consecutively from the array nodes, each carrying an overwhelming pressure. As the first light ring hit the ground, the dust on the battlefield instantly dissipated, and visibility suddenly became clear. As the second light ring pressed down, all the metal manipulated by Magneto was forcibly pushed back to the ground, unable to float again. Logan was also freed as a result. As the third light ring crashed down, the powerful magnetic field around Eric shattered in response, and an invisible shockwave spread, forcing everyone to retreat repeatedly. The fourth light ring fell with the entire grand array. Except for those recognized by Yi Feng, all beings within the barrier knelt on the ground, even Magneto was harshly pressed from midair to the ground. Get lost. Eric was still struggling, trying his best to activate his abilities. But no matter how he urged it, the metal on the ground remained motionless, as if locked firmly to the surface by an even stronger force. The special device under his feet also completely shattered at this moment. So strong. Is this the divine envoy of the Catholic Church? He's probably really going to be the next pope. The absolute power displayed by Yi Feng shocked everyone present. Magneto, whom Logan struggled with all his might to contend with, was suppressed by him so effortlessly. Without even an extra movement. Was this kind of power truly something humans could possess? Could mutants reach such a realm? Even Magneto's almost unsolvable ability was completely countered by Yi Feng. High-ranking officials from various countries stared intently at the screen, as if wanting to see through Yifeng completely through the image. I believe it now, he might really have defeated the legendary demon god. This combat power is too outrageous. Someone shook his head and sighed, his tone full of helplessness. The Pope, far away in the Vatican, watched the live broadcast, a wide smile already on his face. He knew that Yifeng's path to becoming Pope was now unobstructed. Even if he was a mutant. Global live cameras all focused on Yifeng. Holy, noble, majestic. The white-covered holy book floating before him glowed with brilliant light, adding to his sacredness. The Catholic faithful around the world looked at him as if looking up at a divine presence. Eric, you lost. Yifeng's voice came from the sky, echoing clearly across the entire battlefield. The madness in Magneto's eyes gradually faded, replaced by a sense of bewilderment. He looked around, seeing the ruins and devastation he had caused, as if struck by lightning. Lost. Lost. Eric muttered to himself, still somewhat dazed. Even at this moment, he had not realized that his thoughts had long been subtly guided by Yifeng. The illusionary demon Imperial Fist that Yifeng used did not completely control him, but merely amplified his inner ambition and stubbornness. Therefore, Eric's logical thinking was not greatly affected, and all his choices still came from his own heart. There were many experts in mental control in this world, and Yifeng did not want to leave any handle. Your Excellency Yifeng, please, spare Eric's life. Just then, Professor X Charles's voice rang out, firm and earnest. Yifeng turned to look at him, his gaze profound. He couldn't help but recall the various events in the original Marvel timeline. No matter how extreme Magneto's actions were, assassinating the president, attacking high-ranking officials, or even attempting to launch a mutant coup, he was ultimately never executed. Aside from some members of the Brotherhood of Mutants sacrificing themselves, Eric himself always survived. Behind this, there was likely the shadow of Charles's repeated mediation. After all, a mutant who could kill all of humanity in an instant with a cerebro was itself a terrifying deterrent. Do you know what you are saying? Yifeng's eyes narrowed slightly, and a huge sense of oppression once again enveloped the entire field. Logan subtly stepped half a pace forward, vaguely blocking in front of Yifeng, his eyes revealing fierce intent, and his fighting spirit surged again. The atmosphere instantly tensed up again, as if a disagreement would reignite the battle. The golden barrier and grand array still suppressed the earth, emitting a heart-palpitating pressure as light flowed. Everyone within it remained firmly suppressed by Yifeng's unfathomable power, unable to even move a finger. Therefore, when Yifeng slowly spoke, his voice clearly reaching everyone's ears, a bone-chilling sense of fear instantly gripped their hearts. It was as if with just a thought from him, their lives would vanish like smoke. Yifeng, I think I understand what you intend to do. Eric being alive is actually beneficial to both you and me. Charles's voice rang out with difficulty, carrying a trace of strained composure. He paused slightly, complex emotions surfacing on his aged face. We cannot allow ourselves to become humanity's primary target, nor can we become their sole target. Yifeng's gaze shifted, looking at Charles. This old man was far cleverer and more perceptive than he had anticipated. You've surprised me a little, Yifeng said indifferently. He certainly understood Charles's concerns. As the most powerful telepathic mutant in this world, if there wasn't a sufficiently strong and conspicuous shield in front, once humans decided to eliminate threats, Charles himself would inevitably be the first to bear the brunt. The seemingly opposing situation between Eric and Charles now was very likely an unspoken arrangement they had made when they parted ways years ago. It was just that Eric probably never expected Charles to be so naive. To genuinely choose to believe in humanity and attempt to reconcile with them. The Papal State does not have law enforcement power. Moreover, this is the United States. We respect all handling methods of sovereign nations. Yifeng finally spoke again, his voice calm yet carrying an undeniable authority. The moment his voice fell, the golden barrier and complex array patterns covering the heavens and earth began to slowly dissipate, turning into specks of light that vanished into the air. The suffocating pressure also receded, and everyone felt their bodies lighten, finally regaining their ability to move. Yifeng knew that Charles was speaking the truth. Unless he was willing to completely break ties now and forcibly rule the world with military might, he currently did not possess that level of power. There were countless hidden old monsters on Earth. If he truly reached the Sky Father level, he might consider directly overpowering others. But now, it was clearly not the time to make himself a target for all. Eric being alive could at least help him attract attention and take the blame. For example, certain actions that were not suitable for public disclosure could be pushed onto Eric. Moreover, there were quite a few mutants in this world deeply entangled with Eric. Wanda, Pietro, and Lorna. As for Charles, Yifeng had no immediate plans to touch him. If he pushed too hard, causing Jean Grey to lose control and the Phoenix Force to run rampant, that would be no laughing matter. That was a terrifying power that could instantly vaporize even an Omega-level mutant like Apocalypse, and Yifeng did not want to gamble on that probability right now. The purpose of this trip had been achieved. Under the global live broadcast, his personal and the Papal State's prestige would surely soar to unprecedented heights. Upon returning to the Papal State, it would also be time to prepare for his succession to the position of Pope. As the barrier completely dispersed, the military, which had been waiting outside for a long time, immediately swarmed in. Tanks rumbled, armed helicopters hovered in the air, and fully armed soldiers advanced nervously with their guns, quickly securing the scene. When they saw the several factions confronting each other in the field, every soldier's face was filled with tension and vigilance. Everyone, I am Yifeng, the commander of the Saint Seiya Legion of the Papal State. The Brotherhood of Mutants has been contained, you may take them away. Regarding this incident, the Papal State respects all solutions proposed by your country. Yifeng's voice clearly spread throughout the entire venue, as if carrying some power to soothe people's hearts. As soon as he finished speaking, he clearly felt the atmosphere of the surrounding military ease. No one was confident in fighting against this group of mutants with various abilities. Being able to smoothly take over the members of the Brotherhood of Mutants was already the best outcome. As for the X-Men and the people from the Papal State, the higher-ups had already explicitly instructed, never provoke them actively. Heaven knew what consequences might arise if Charles or Yifeng were stimulated. Yifeng, can we talk? Charles maneuvered his wheelchair a few steps forward, his tone sincere. Behind him, the X-Men looked at Yifeng with vigilance and apprehension. In this battle, they had truly witnessed Yifeng's strength. Even a powerful existence like Eric had been easily suppressed by him. Furthermore, according to Charles, Yifeng also possessed the ability to defend against telepathy. This was simply a hexagonal warrior with no discernible weaknesses. Even the terrifying power Logan had displayed earlier left them with lingering fear. There's nothing to talk about between us. As long as you don't abandon those naive ideas, we can't reach a consensus. Yifeng glanced at Charles indifferently. Soon, personnel from both sides were separated and led away from the scene. Yifeng and his group were arranged to stay in a luxurious 5-star hotel in New York. Not long after, a knock sounded. An official in a suit respectfully stood outside the door. Yifeng, our country's high-level officials wish to have a video conference with you. The combat power Yifeng displayed this time was too dazzling for the United States high-level officials to ignore. They had to engage in direct dialogue with him. Soon after, Yifeng was led to a meticulously arranged video conference room. On the screen, the U.S. President and several high-ranking military officials and Chable representatives were already sitting upright. Yifeng, I believe this is our first formal meeting, Mr. President said gently, looking at Yifeng's young yet unfathomable face. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Yifeng smiled slightly, his demeanor composed, making people feel at ease, yet no one dared to underestimate the power represented by his smile. May I ask, Yifeng, besides handling the Eric incident, do you have any other important matters during your visit to the United States? A military representative cautiously probed. Yifeng knew that the main topic had arrived. The Rockefeller family must pay for their actions, he said in a calm tone, yet with an undeniable resolve. As for how to reconcile, I think my conditions have been made very clear. The Papal State has no intention of being an enemy of your country, but anyone who attempts to hunt me down will surely pay the price. The Papal State never fears war. A brief silence fell in the conference room. Our side will urge the Rockefeller family to meet the demands of the Papal State. Also, regarding the transaction you mentioned earlier. Another Chable representative took over, his tone clearly urgent. The temptation of immortality was simply too great, enough to make them compromise. Compared to the kind of eternal life that vampires had to hide in the darkness and be controlled by others, the future Yi Feng described was clearly more enticing. Coupled with the terrifying strength he displayed, it forced them to seriously consider the possibility of cooperating with the Papal State. The Papal State will later announce the specific transaction methods and exchange conditions. Yi Feng's lips curved into a meaningful smile. Here, I want to remind everyone, the Earth is not as safe as it appears on the surface. As you know, demons truly exist, and the holy relics of the Papal State have a strong restraining effect on dark creatures and even demons. In critical moments, they might save your lives. The video conference lasted for about an hour. Yi Feng clearly stated that he would not interfere with the United States' handling of Eric and the Brotherhood of Mutants. He knew in his heart that this storm, triggered by the exposure of mutants, had only just begun. The global live broadcast event was like a giant rock thrown into a calm lake, stirring up monstrous waves. People's perceptions of mutants around the world underwent a subtle yet complete transformation. Fear still existed, but a stronger, almost overwhelming curiosity had blossomed. On the streets, in online forums, and even at family dinner tables, people were passionately discussing the earth-shattering battle and the godlike power of mutants. The hustle and bustle of New York had temporarily subsided. Yi Feng stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling window of his high-rise hotel room. It's time. Time to meet the sorcerer who guards the earth. He muttered to himself, his voice so soft it almost dissipated into the air. The New York Sanctum, one of the three great Sanctum Sanctorum, was located in a corner of this city. The three great sanctums were connected by secret spatial passages, guarding the Earth from multi-dimensional invasions. After the event, Yi Feng did not immediately leave New York. He knew that various forces in the United States had undoubtedly arranged countless eyes to monitor his every move, but he didn't care. The existence of the Sanctum Sanctorum was beyond the prying eyes of ordinary people, its magic defenses were enough to block all surveillance. After properly arranging matters for Logan and others, Yi Feng followed the guidance of his senses and arrived at the location of the New York Sanctum, an old mansion that looked ancient and ordinary, yet out of place with the surrounding buildings. As he stepped onto the stone steps in front of the door, the heavy door, carved with profound runes, silently opened inward, as if it had been waiting for his arrival. Yi Feng was not surprised, he knew that Ancient One was already aware of his visit. Welcome to the Sanctum Sanctorum, Your Excellency Yi Feng. Inside the door, a figure in a bright yellow sorcerer's robe bowed slightly. It was the Archmage who had previously dealt with the demon Valak with him. Are you on duty at the New York Sanctum? Yi Feng was slightly surprised. Indeed, it's my turn to be on duty at the New York Sanctum this year. The sorcerer nodded, then stepped aside to invite Yi Feng in. I saw your battle with Eric. You have become even more powerful. His tone carried undisguised emotion. The level of power Yi Feng displayed was beyond imagination. Within the entire Sanctum Sanctorum, perhaps only the unfathomable Sorcerer Supreme Ji Yi could confidently contend with him. Please follow me, Sorcerer Supreme has been informed of your arrival and asked me to greet you here. Yi Feng followed the sorcerer into the interior of the sanctum. The space inside was far more vast than it appeared from the outside, filled with traces of magic and the aura of ancient knowledge. They passed through two spatial gates consecutively, and in an instant, they had traversed thousands of miles, arriving from the bustling streets of New York to a tranquil and spiritual place. The Holy Land of Sorcerers, Kamar Taj. In a simple courtyard, a bald old man in a plain robe, with a slightly thin back, was facing away from them, leisurely brewing tea. You're here, sit. An old and peaceful voice came, without turning around, yet knowing everything. Yi Feng walked to Ancient One's opposite side and sat down quietly. He looked at Ancient One, who appeared as an old man, and a fleeting, extremely subtle hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, but he said nothing more. Ancient One slowly pushed a steaming cup of clear tea in front of Yi Feng, then raised his eyes, his wise and peaceful gaze seeming to see through people's hearts. Surprised to see me like this? Are you surprised that I am not the female image you recognize, or are you surprised that I am not wearing the time stone? Yi Feng's momentary emotional fluctuation did not escape this powerful guardian. Greetings, Sorcerer Ancient One. Yi Feng took the teacup, avoiding the main point and not directly answering the question. He understood in his heart that Ancient One, who appeared as an elderly male, likely possessed true power far exceeding that of the female Ancient One in the MCU universe. This was a powerful being who, relying solely on his own profound magical cultivation, could cautiously contend with numerous dimensional demon gods, making him arguably the strongest sorcerer in a single universe, without equal. I generally know what you want to do. Ancient One took a sip of clear tea, his tone calm. I also understand what you are planning. The universe is free, and living beings are also free. Even the Creator would not easily interfere with the natural evolution of the universe, let alone me. He put down his teacup and looked at Yi Feng with clear eyes. As long as it doesn't involve the fundamental survival of the earth and the overall destruction of humanity, whatever you want to do is your freedom. He clearly stated his attitude. He protected the earth from dimensional invasion. Rather than interfering in its internal affairs, he was simply too busy. Yi Feng nodded, indicating he understood. He pondered for a moment, then asked another question that bothered him. Sorcerer Ancient One, do you know if there is a substance, or some method, that can perfectly fuse two metals with vastly different characteristics? I know. Ancient One's answer was unusually brief. Yi Feng's spirits lifted. However, the two terms Ancient One then uttered made him feel as if he had punched cotton. Reality Stone. Chaos Magic. This answer, indeed, there was nothing wrong with it. The Reality Stone could achieve perfect fusion based on existing matter, and even create things out of thin air, as long as the energy provided was powerful enough, and once its creations were formed, they were truly real, unless erased again by the power of the stone. Chaos magic was also known for altering reality. Its power could even erase all mutants in an entire universe with a single thought. But chaos magic was extremely unstable, with great risks once its power supply was lost. As for the Reality Stone, in this universe, which clearly deviated from the sacred timeline, the 6 Infinity Stones were unaccounted for and impossible to find. Yi Feng felt a headache coming on. Thank you for your answer. He was somewhat helpless but remained polite. Ancient One seemed to see through his helplessness, slowly put down his teacup, and suddenly changed the subject. Speaking of which, Yi Feng, do you want to become a god? Yi Feng raised an eyebrow. Oh. How so? The power system you cultivate, called Cosmos, plus the sacred text you are meticulously crafting, Ancient One's gaze seemed to penetrate everything. You intend to follow a path similar to Cthon, the god of black magic, or Vishanti, attempting to become a new dimensional lord, correct? Yi Feng did not deny it. I do have that idea. There was no point in hiding it from Ancient One. The treatment of a god of light has never been too good. Ancient One said meaningfully. Yi Feng merely smiled faintly, offering no comment. After a moment of silence, Ancient One suddenly put forth a proposal that caught Yi Feng off guard. Then, are you interested in becoming the Sorcerer Supreme? Yi Feng was indeed stunned. Inherit the Sanctum Sanctorum, and the Vishanti's eternal shield formation will be under your control. Ancient One slowly explained, his tone carrying an indescribable allure. At that time, you will simultaneously control two major forces, the Sanctum Sanctorum and the Papacy. Integrating the resources of these two, you might truly achieve your long-cherished wish and create a whole new social system. Even existences like Hell Dimension, Dark Dimension, and the Dream Dimension can be utilized by you within the rules. He looked at Yi Feng with piercing eyes. Do you have any thoughts on this? Ancient One's original intended successor was not Yi Feng. But during this meeting, he found that the clear river of time he could originally see had become blurry due to Yi Feng's presence. He even glimpsed some extremely brilliant fragments of the future that should not have existed. There were countless branches of the future, and Ancient One could not assert that he had seen all outcomes. After all, he was only a Skyfather-level sorcerer, far from reaching the omniscient and omnipotent creator. But he wanted to take a gamble. Yi Feng possessed immense ambition and clear goals. Such a person was almost unlikely to be lost and corrupted by power, which was crucial for the successor of the Sorcerer Supreme. After all, the temptations of the Darkhold, Dark Dimension, and Hell Dimension were constant. Moreover, who stipulated that the Sorcerer Supreme and a Dimensional Lord could not be the same person? Vishanti itself was not the ruler of the White Magic Dimension. Yi Feng held the warm teacup and fell into a long silence. Before that, I want to ask you something. Just how powerful are the so-called Dimension Lords? Yi Feng looked at Ancient One, asking the question that concerned him most. In the Marvel Universe settings he knew, Skyfather-level beings were already at the pinnacle of a single universe. The god kings of various pantheons were mostly at this level. Some weaker pantheons even struggled to produce a single Skyfather-level powerhouse. At first glance, the number of Skyfather-level beings displayed in the Marvel Universe seemed considerable, but looking across the vast Star River, were those mere dozen or so peak powerhouses really that many? Those who could truly transcend the Skyfather level, within the scope of a single universe, were probably only the mysterious Celestials. Even the members of the older Cosmic Elder Council generally had average strength comparable to the Skyfather level. Odin, piloting the destroyer armor, had a glorious record of defeating a Celestial in a one-on-one battle. Of course, the subsequent outcome of being ganged up on by the Celestials was not so pleasant. Even a Skyfather-level being like Thanos commanded vast star regions, controlling over 5,000 life planets. This was the weight of a top-tier powerhouse. Extremely strong. Ancient One's expression grew solemn. With a wave of her hand, the teapot beside them automatically filled with steaming hot tea, and the misty water vapor seemed to reflect the gravity of the topic. Earth is a unique nexus where countless dimensions and the real universe converge, a necessary gateway to the real dimension. This is precisely why the Vishanti chose to establish the core of their protective array here. Ancient One spoke slowly, her voice calm yet imbued with undeniable power. As for Dimension Lords, there is also a world of difference between them. She picked up her teacup and took a light sip. The weakest among them have power roughly equivalent to the Skyfather level. Some of these demon gods have been sealed by our predecessors throughout Earth's long history. And the more powerful ones, such as Mephisto, Dormammu, and Nightmare. Ancient One set down her teacup, her gaze sharp. Even if they leave their own dimensions and enter the real universe, they are still capable of unleashing terrifying Skyfather-level peak power. If they are within their own dimensional home ground. Ancient One paused, allowing Yi Feng to fully process the information. They can then mobilize the power of their entire dimension, and their strength would be comparable to a fully formed celestial, truly entering the scope of a single universe level. These are the targets the Sanctum Sanctorum needs to focus on defending against. However, above these, there are even older, more terrifying existences. Ancient One's voice unconsciously dropped a few degrees, as if merely mentioning their names carried a risk. They are the old gods that existed since the dawn of the universe. For example, Chthon, the source of black magic, Set, the serpent god symbolizing great destruction, and the Old Ones, the unspeakable evil god, Shuma-Gorath the Eye Demon. And the source of our Vishanti's white magic is the trinity of Oshtor, Hagath, and Agamotto. As for those supreme beings who almost never appear and have no interest in the real dimension, Ancient One shook her head slightly, a rare trace of awe flashing in her eyes. For example, the one known as the strongest demon god, Sidorak, who rules the Crimson Cosmos, even the creator I worship is extremely secretive about such beings. Ancient One's explanation was detailed and thorough. She knew Yi Feng was already interested, but in the face of the Dimension Lord threat, she had to let him know all the risks. The position of Sorcerer Supreme not only represented power and responsibility, but also came with immense dangers that could drive an ordinary person completely insane at any moment. Remember, Ancient One added with particular seriousness. Once you venture beyond the protection of the real dimension and directly confront those old god-level beings, their mere presence can be a form of corruption. Do not look directly at them, do not speak their names, and do not even think about them too much. Their power level has reached a terrifying point where a single thought or word is enough to cause a living being to completely fall. Yi Feng fell silent. This silence was not born of fear, but from a rapid deduction and comparison. He was comparing the Dimension Lords described by Ancient One with the supreme deities from the mythological systems he knew in his previous life. If Ancient One's description was accurate, then the strength of these Dimension Lords was probably comparable to the primordial old gods he remembered who had comprehended the power of the grand universe and wielded the will of the gods. For example, the great mother god Gaia and the god of the abyss Talos from the Saint Seiya world. Such beings are considered top tier in any universe. He vaguely remembered that the Crimson Lord Sidorak even had an astonishing record of defeating the living tribunal. That was a supreme arbiter who transcended the multiverse, a being second only to OAA. Although it was uncertain if that was an M-body, it was enough to illustrate the opponent's terror. I think I understand. After a long time, Yi Feng slowly spoke, his eyes regaining clarity. These beings are indeed unimaginably powerful. However, I am still very interested in the position of Sorcerer Supreme. Hearing this, Ancient One finally showed a genuine and relieved smile. Finally, she saw the light at the end of the tunnel, the prospect of getting off work. As Ancient One said, once he inherited the position of Sorcerer Supreme, he would be able to control the eternal shield array set up by the Vishanti. At that time, occasionally, negligently, letting one or two harmless little demons cause some trouble on Earth would be as easy as pie. In the face of external threats of the Dimension Lord invasion level, many internal conflicts on Earth might instantly seem insignificant. A certain country's high-ranking officials massacred by demons. That was clearly the work of evil dimensional creatures. What does it have to do with my holy church? But Yi Feng knew full well that this was akin to dancing on the tip of a knife. Every Dimension Lord was an existence that had lived for countless years and was incredibly cunning. Dealing with them, even a slight misstep could lead to eternal fools. To implement such a dangerous balancing strategy, his current power was far from enough. Even someone as strong as Ancient One had walked on thin ice across countless dimensions to maintain Earth's peace for many years. Very good. Ancient One nodded approvingly, patting Yi Feng's shoulder. I will remain in this position for a while longer. When you return to the church this time, you should be able to smoothly succeed as Pope. Once your power advances further and you are capable of handling things independently, that will be the moment for you to take over as Sorcerer Supreme. This was not the sacred timeline, and not all previous Sorcerer Supremes had artifacts like the Time Stone for protection. Ancient One had witnessed the fates of too many stranges in parallel universes, most dying tragically from dimensional invasions, or being abandoned by all due to practicing forbidden arts. The very few Dark Doctor Stranges who survived but lost all their loved ones and friends, and themselves became non-human entities, existed in universes that were left in dead silence. Could that truly be considered a victory? I understand. Before I possess sufficient power, I will not rashly shoulder this heavy responsibility. Yi Feng nodded solemnly. Currently, he still had church affairs on Earth to integrate and handle, making it difficult to focus on other things. Ultimately, strength determined everything. This return to the church would allow him to begin the breakthrough to the middle stage of the sixth sense. From an ordinary person who awakened his past life memories to now touching the edge of the Skyfather level, less than a year had passed. Yi Feng was quite satisfied with this. The path of cultivation, after all, required taking one step at a time. I look forward to that day. Ancient One smiled gently. You should go back. If you have leisure, you are welcome to visit the Sanctum Sanctorum anytime. Although the magic system here is different from what you cultivate, drawing on various strengths can also be helpful to you. Yi Feng did not stay long at Kamar Taj. The current him did not entirely belong to that mysterious place. After returning to the New York Sanctum Sanctorum through a spatial portal, he briefly conversed with the on-duty sorcerer before turning and merging into the bustling streets of New York. His stay in the Sanctum Sanctorum was not long. All told, including that important conversation with Ancient One, it was no more than 3 hours. But this brief disappearance made the agents tasked with monitoring him as anxious as ants on a hot pan. The commander of the Catholic Church's St. Seiya Legion had vanished into thin air under their strict surveillance. They watched Yi Feng walk into that ancient building, but no matter what method they used, they couldn't find an entrance, let alone get in. After reporting to their superiors, the feedback they received was even more alarming. All records concerning that building were blank, as if it didn't exist in any official archives. This made them realize with a jolt that the secrets hidden in this world were far deeper than imagined, and even in areas they believed they had strong control over, there were shadows they couldn't touch. Having no other recourse, they could only wait anxiously outside until 3 hours later, when Yi Feng's figure reappeared safe and sound, and everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Shortly after Yi Feng returned to his hotel, the head of the intelligence department personally rushed over at the fastest speed. This senior executive, who usually stayed in his office, now had an undisguised look of urgency on his face. Your Eminence Yifeng, these are all the asset certificates transferred by the Rockefeller family. The head respectfully presented a thick stack of documents. The details of real estate and equity are all here. As per your request, the cash deposits in their personal accounts have not been confiscated, and all other core assets are included here. Originally, minor matters like delivering documents didn't require his personal involvement, but after hearing his subordinate's bizarre report about Yifeng's disappearance, he couldn't sit still. That mysterious building was like a thorn in his heart. If he didn't figure it out, he probably wouldn't be able to rest or eat in peace. Thank you for your trouble. When I return to the Catholic Church, I will immediately send someone to take over the handling of this matter. Yifeng merely glanced casually at the document cover, without opening it to look closely. These enormous riches, enough to drive the world mad, seemed insignificant in his eyes. Then, the remaining members of the Rockefeller family, the head cautiously probed. Let it end here. Yifeng's tone was calm but carried an undeniable decisiveness. The main culprit had committed suicide to atone for his sins, and the family had surrendered their accumulated wealth over generations. Without the protection of power and money, their future days would be a punishment in themselves. The Rockefeller family had offended quite a few people in the past. There were also many who wished them a fate worse than death, so Yifeng didn't need to worry. Annihilation was not the goal, and it also left room for the Catholic Church's future plans. The head nodded, finally asking the true purpose of his visit. Also, there's a small matter I'd like to ask you about, that building you entered yesterday. He hesitated, as inquiring about a powerful individual's private itinerary was undoubtedly sensitive and dangerous, but due to his duty, he had to bite the bullet and ask. That is the Sanctum Sanctorum. Yifeng did not hide it, directly giving the answer. One of the guardians of human civilization, the main force against invasions from hell and other dimensions. They are the most powerful organization of sorcerers on Earth and even in the universe. My personal advice is that you don't need to expend energy investigating them. He looked at the head, his words carrying a benevolent warning. Excessive attention to them will not benefit you. Moreover, the Sanctum Sanctorum is not a place outsiders can enter freely. Since he had confirmed his status as the Sorcerer Supreme's successor, in his future plans, the Sanctum Sanctorum would no longer be an organization completely hidden behind the scenes. It would, like mutants, the Catholic Church, and other extraordinary powers, gradually step into the forefront, jointly constructing Earth's new extraordinary order. In Yifeng's blueprint, building a new, inclusive extraordinary social system was a vast and complex project. Developing and perfecting the abilities of mutants was just one part of it. He also planned to spread the method of cultivating cosmos. Although in the Marvel universe, those who could successfully awaken their cosmos were destined to be rare, perhaps only exceptionally gifted individuals like Logan would have a chance. In addition, the elemental magic he controlled would also become a viable extraordinary path. He was inclined to create an elemental book, similar to the Darkhold or the Book of Vishanti, documenting the mysteries of elemental magic. Users could obtain basic elemental imprints through it, and then continuously strengthen them through their own cultivation. Of course, during this process, the elemental imprints would also draw a portion of the user's energy as repayment. And the magic system of the Sanctum Sanctorum was a new path he had just incorporated into his plans. These three main extraordinary paths, mutant abilities, cosmos cultivation, elemental magic, and Kamar Taj magic, if successfully rolled out, would be enough to cover the vast majority of potential people worldwide. Even if one couldn't awaken the mutant gene, people would have the opportunity to step through the door of the extraordinary through diligent cultivation. To a certain extent, this would break the monopoly of talent and resources, providing a channel for upward mobility from the lower strata, forming a relatively healthy and sustainable extraordinary ecosystem. More importantly, if this vision were realized, billions of lives, each on their respective paths of cultivation, would indirectly provide him with unimaginable benefits. His thoughts returned, and Yifeng saw the intelligence head in front of him nodding thoughtfully. The other party had clearly taken his warning to heart. After all, some inexplicably erased clues now seemed to have a reasonable explanation. I understand, thank you very much for the information. I won't disturb your rest anymore. Having obtained the key information, the head dared not linger. Although Yi Feng appeared gentle and calm at the moment, a professional instinct still made him feel uneasy, as if facing a lion that had sheathed its claws. After the head left, Yi Feng stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the bustling and complex metropolis below. The sunlight fell on him, reflecting his resolute silhouette. The first step of the plan had finally been taken steadily. The future of mutants, and indeed the entire extraordinary world of Earth, had revealed its first glimmer of dawn. The next morning, Yi Feng took Logan, Clarice, and others on a special plane back to the Catholic Church. At this time, the Vatican was already overcrowded. Catholic Church believers from all over the world flew to their holy land. They wanted to receive the blessing of the divine messenger. The Pope was also making extensive preparations. In his opinion, there were no longer any obstacles to Yi Feng's succession ceremony as Pope. The plane landed smoothly on the runway, and Clarice looked out the window with curiosity. "Wow, so many people!" she exclaimed. Beside her, Xiao Taoqi Anna Marie also widened her eyes, her face full of novelty. Beside the airport runway and inside the terminal, there was a dense crowd of people. Even before the plane landed, it had to circle in the air for about 10 minutes. This scale is too exaggerated. Although Vatican is a holy land, how can there be so many people normally? Even during the grandest festivals, I've never seen such a huge crowd. Logan stroked his chin, looking puzzled. Yi Feng closed the thick ancient book in his hand, a slight smile on his lips. It seems they are all here for the Holy See. Our appearance this time has had a better effect than expected. He stood up, his pure white robe falling to the ground. Let's go, back to the Apostolic Palace first. The 5 of them, all dressed in the Holy See's white robes, stood out remarkably in the crowd. Especially Yi Feng, with his silver hair draped over his shoulders and extraordinary demeanor, instantly attracted everyone's attention. Suddenly, someone in the crowd gasped, "It's His Excellency Yi Feng. Oh my God, it really is him." And members of the Saint Seiya Legion. The gasps spread like ripples, and the crowd immediately stirred. Countless believers surged towards them, their eyes shining with fanaticism and piety, each hoping to get closer, even if only to catch a glimpse of Yi Feng. The young Savas nervously took half a step back. "These people are all here for us." Clarice and Xiao Taoqi also instinctively drew closer together. As mutants, they had never experienced such a scene of being adored by so many. Logan looked at the surging crowd before him, his expression dazed. Once upon a time, he was a mutant hiding and dodging. Now, he had become an object of admiration for thousands. This drastic change made him feel as if he was in another life. Yi Feng stopped, facing the surging crowd, his voice gentle yet clear, spreading throughout the entire airport. "Everyone, we still need to report back to the Pope. Could you please make way for us?" Remarkably, as soon as he spoke, the fervent crowd spontaneously parted to both sides, forming a clear path. Though still excited, the believers respectfully stood in place, watching the 5 slowly pass. After successfully leaving the airport, the 3 young people's cheeks were flushed with excitement. Savas whispered to Clarice, "I never imagined that as mutants, we could receive such courtesy." Logan walked beside Yi Feng, remarking with emotion, "The things you said less than a year ago are slowly becoming reality. This change is incredibly fast." Yi Feng smiled slightly. "This is just the beginning. As long as we follow our plan, this world will usher in true peace." The journey from the airport to Vatican was short. Upon returning to the Apostolic Palace, Yi Feng sent Logan and the other 3 back to the training ground, while he went directly to the Papal Hall, where the Pope and the College of Cardinals had been waiting for a long time. Pushing open the heavy door, Yi Feng bowed slightly. "His Holiness the Pope, Cardinals, I have returned." The old Pope excitedly stepped forward and clapped Yi Feng's shoulder vigorously. "You've done well, Yi Feng. My premonition was not wrong. The Holy See will regain its glory under your leadership." After Yi Feng took his seat, the old Pope surveyed the room and solemnly announced, "This meeting has only one agenda item, the vote on Saint Seiya Legion Commander Yi Feng's succession to Pope." The result was without suspense. It passed unanimously. Yi Feng stood up and saluted the cardinals present. "Thank you for your trust, I will not fail you." He took out a folder. This is the asset list received from the Rockefeller family, and the Holy See needs to send people to take it over. I propose renaming it the Sanctuary Conglomerate. After a brief pause, he continued, at the same time, I suggest renaming Vatican to Sanctuary. Sanctuary. A very good name. Let's settle on that. The old pope pondered for a moment, a glint of approval in his eyes. He turned to the secretary, announced 2 resolutions to the public. Yifeng will officially succeed as pope next month, and effective immediately, Vatican will be renamed Sanctuary. The old pope looked at Yifeng with satisfaction. This young man, whom he had personally discovered, would surely lead the Holy See to unprecedented heights. Perhaps the day recorded as a myth and legend was no longer distant. After leaving the papal hall, Yifeng went directly back to the meditation room in the training ground. He felt he was only one step away from breaking through to the mid-stage of the sixth sense. If he could break through before his enthronement, he would be able to perform large-scale miracles, allowing believers all over the world to witness the advent of divine intervention. At that time, the Holy See's prestige would reach its peak since the Middle Ages. Inside the meditation room, Yifeng sat cross-legged and quickly entered a state of deep meditation. With Logan, a mutant who had awakened the sixth sense and possessed self-healing abilities, guarding the security of Sanctuary was not a concern. As the Apostolic Palace's announcement was released, believers worldwide erupted in excitement. However, high-ranking officials in various countries fell silent. A mutant was about to become the leader of a sovereign nation and, at the same time, the spiritual leader of hundreds of millions of believers. Even more shocking was that the College of Cardinals unanimously approved this resolution, the entire process taking less than 10 minutes, setting a record for the fastest and most highly supported papal election in the Holy See's history. We can't wait any longer, we must immediately launch a public opinion offensive. In the secret meeting rooms of certain countries, the high-ranking officials reached a consensus. They planned to heavily promote the mutant threat theory through the media after Yifeng's succession. Since Yifeng rose to power through his prestige, they would make Sanctuary's prestige plummet. Time flew by, and half a month passed in an instant. Only 3 days remained until Yifeng's succession as pope. With a buzz, a spatial portal appeared in the training ground, and Clarice stepped out, her battle robe stained with specks of blood. These annoying rats. If His Excellency weren't in seclusion and Sanctuary needed guarding, I would have wiped them all out. She said through gritted teeth. No need to be angry. Logan sat cross-legged in the center of the training ground, meditating with his eyes closed. After comprehending the cosmos, he increasingly preferred this method of cultivation that calmed the mind. Now, his killing intent was restrained, making him appear like a gentle middle-aged man, but anyone who underestimated him would pay a heavy price. The Saint Seiya Legion is short-handed. Our most important task now is to ensure that Sanctuary is absolutely safe before His Excellency's succession. Logan opened his eyes. Xiao Taoqi Anna Marie, however, was very optimistic, but thanks to them, I've become more proficient in controlling my abilities. The practical combat during this period had greatly improved her fighting skills. Click. The door to the meditation room gently opened, and Yifeng slowly walked out. The aura around him was even deeper and more peaceful, and stars seemed to flow in his eyes. He had successfully broken through to the mid-stage of the sixth sense. Your Eminence, you've finally emerged from seclusion. Clarice and Anna Marie exclaimed in unison, their faces alight with excitement. They knew better than anyone that 3 days from now would be the day Yifeng was officially crowned pope. I finally waited for you. Logan let out a long breath, his taut nerves finally relaxing. The heavy responsibility of guarding the sanctuary had rested on his shoulders during this period, and for a warrior accustomed to acting alone, it was indeed no small challenge. Yifeng's gaze swept over the still wet bloodstains on Clarice's battle robe, his brow furrowing slightly. It seems it hasn't been peaceful lately. Indeed, many are stirring. Ever since the news of your impending succession spread, various forces have been active in the shadows. Media in some countries have begun to widely propagate the mutant threat theory, clearly intending to oppose us in public opinion. Logan's expression was solemn. Yifeng chuckled upon hearing this. Logan, you are increasingly showing the demeanor of a leader. After breaking through to the mid-stage of the sixth sense, Yifeng could feel the qualitative change produced by the cosmos within his body. Now, even facing Skyfather-level powerhouses like Dracula or Apocalypse, with his element control ability, he had the power to contend. Most of the hidden powerhouses on Earth were no longer a threat to him. This allowed the subsequent plan to proceed without as many constraints. After the succession ceremony, it's time to advance our plan. With the resources of the sanctuary conglomerate, the glory of the sanctuary will surely shine throughout the entire world. Yi Feng looked out the window. Yi Feng was not worried about the enemies in the dark. If not for Earth being such a special place, full of hidden talents, his current strength would be enough to overthrow the government of a small country. But in this perilous Marvel universe, Skyfather-level power was far from enough. 3 days passed in a flash. During these days, Yi Feng had been setting up protective barriers for the sanctuary. Although the current territory was not yet large enough to rebuild the 12 zodiac temples, he had carved profound runes containing divine power throughout the sanctuary using his cosmos. These divine scripts from his past life's memories, though extremely taxing to draw, could construct a solid defense for the sanctuary. It's time, Yi Feng. The old pope pushed open the door, looking at Yi Feng, who was clad in magnificent papal robes, his eyes filled with satisfaction. At this moment, Yi Feng, dressed in splendid robes, his handsome features set against the pure white, looked like a deity descended. The two walked side by side towards St. Peter's Square. When Yi Feng's figure appeared on the high platform, a thunderous cheer erupted in the square. It's His Eminence Yi Feng. A divine messenger. He is a true divine messenger. Countless believers shouted excitedly, and those watching the ceremony via live broadcast also held their breath in front of their screens. The limited space of the sanctuary could not accommodate all the pilgrims who came, but at this moment, the eyes of the whole world were focused here. The coronation ceremony was solemn and dignified. When the old pope placed the papal crown on Yi Feng's head, an enduring applause resounded in the square. Now, please welcome the new pope to give his address. The old pope smiled and stepped aside. Yi Feng slowly stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the devout believers below, his voice clearly reaching every corner. The Church, having endured 1,000 years of vicissitudes, has always been a sanctuary for the hearts of the world. In this era of change, the sanctuary will become the strongest backing for all people. He paused, then continued, do you yearn to become divine messengers? Do you aspire to extraordinary power? The sanctuary will open its doors to all, whether mutants or humans, as long as you are sincere, you will have the opportunity to obtain the key to the path of the extraordinary. As soon as his voice fell, a 7-colored glow suddenly rose around the sanctuary. A rainbow spanning the sky appeared, breathtakingly beautiful under the sunlight. This is a miracle. Someone exclaimed. This is my blessing to you all. May this holy light cleanse your bodies and minds. Yi Feng spread his arms. A magic array formed by rainbow light enveloped the entire sanctuary. Suddenly, several shrill screams came from the crowd. Several dark creatures, lurking among the believers, revealed their true forms under the holy light, and in a blink of an eye, were purified into ashes. Oh my God, dark creatures were hidden among us. The believers were filled with lingering fear. As the holy light fell, the believers closed their eyes one after another, feeling an unprecedented tranquility. Some people suffering from injuries and illnesses were pleasantly surprised to find their pain rapidly receding. Those with congenital disabilities were even more excited to find their deformed limbs recovering at a visible rate. My burns healed. My leg. I can stand straight. This scene spread throughout the world via live broadcast, causing a global sensation. God, I should have gone to the sanctuary myself. That's a miracle. A true miracle. The baptism lasted for a full half hour. As the rainbow light gradually dissipated, the believers reluctantly opened their eyes. The ceremony concludes here. From today onwards, the sanctuary will have a permanent protective barrier. Unauthorized persons will not be able to enter or exit freely. Yi Feng's voice pulled everyone back to reality. What was astonishing was that tens of thousands of believers left in an orderly manner without any commotion. When the last believer left the sanctuary's boundary, the 7-colored glow reappeared, forming a huge hemispherical barrier that enveloped the entire sanctuary. From now on, this will be the true holy city. The believers looked at the sacred barrier, their eyes filled with reverence. And Yi Feng's declaration at the ceremony had already sown seeds in the hearts of countless young people. Countless people yearning for extraordinary power began to pack their bags, preparing to embark on a pilgrimage to the sanctuary. That night, when Yi Feng returned to the apostolic palace, Clarice hurriedly delivered a secret report. News from the Sanctum Sanctorum. Yi Feng was somewhat surprised. After unrolling the scroll, a meaningful smile played on his lips. The document detailed the activities of a demon who had just escaped from hell to the human world. This demon had already settled in the United States. And was also bringing in its companions. Sorcerer Ancient One's gift comes at just the right time. Yi Feng gently stroked the scroll. This was undoubtedly an excellent opportunity to consolidate the sanctuary's prestige. The prerequisite was that he could personally put an end to this demon. Logan, take a look. Yi Feng handed the scroll to Logan. A demon. Logan took the scroll, his brow furrowing as he looked at the information on it. He had only heard of demons in legends, and he hadn't expected them to actually appear. The sanctuary is currently short-staffed, and I've just become pope, so I have many things to attend to. You and Clarice go investigate the situation first. If there are any problems, contact me at any time. Remember, be careful. Yi Feng said to Logan. Understood, Your Eminence. Logan bowed respectfully. Yi Feng was not worried about their safety. As long as it wasn't a demon god-level powerhouse descending, Logan's strength would definitely be sufficient. After receiving Yi Feng's order, Logan and Clarice wasted no time, quickly boarded the papal's private plane, and flew directly to their destination. Inside the cabin, Logan flipped through the few intelligence files he held, his brows tightly furrowed. Besides knowing the target is a demon, other information is almost blank. This is like searching for a needle in a haystack. It's indeed tricky, Clarice nodded in agreement, analyzing the situation with relative calm. However, His Holiness has already contacted Blade in advance. We can utilize the vampire's intelligence network. In the underground world, their information is often more up-to-date than official channels. She recalled her previous experience of handling vampire affairs with Yi Feng, during which she had established contact with Blade. Now that Yi Feng had ascended to the position of Pope, the power he displayed made Blade dare not be negligent. After absorbing the power of the Blood God, Blade's strength grew day by day, and his prestige in the underground world was soaring, even allowing him to command some vampires to serve him. Before finding a way to completely resolve the root of the vampires, Blade temporarily changed his strategy, instead utilizing this dark force. In addition to the vampire connection, the Catholic Church itself and the emerging sanctuary conglomerate also went full throttle in gathering information. Yi Feng, well aware that intelligence was the eyes and ears of an organization, had long made building an intelligence network a top priority. After the plane landed in the U.S., a special car arranged by the sanctuary conglomerate was already waiting at the airport. The new president of the conglomerate, a devout Catholic, came to greet them, respectfully saying, "My Lord Logan, my Lord Clarice, you've had a long journey. No need for pleasantries, do you have any new information?" Logan, direct in his nature, cut straight to the chase. The arrival of a demon was no small matter, every second counted. The president handed over a folder, his tone apologetic. "This is all the information we've been able to gather so far. Our intelligence network is still under construction, so we can only grope around the edges of the underground world. There truly aren't many valuable leads." Logan took the file, and Clarice also leaned in to look at it with him. The report documented a bizarre murder case that occurred 3 days ago in a remote town's tavern. Dozens of customers died, with no signs of struggle at the scene, but the temperature was extremely low. The deceased had no external injuries, their internal organs were intact, and the cause of death was that all their blood had been instantly frozen, and their eyes were a strange, pure black. Local investigators classified it as a supernatural event and tried to pin the blame on mutants, until the Catholic Church intervened forcefully and stopped it a day ago. Trying to make mutants take the blame again. These fools. Logan angrily slammed his fist on the armrest of the seat, detesting such tactics. Isn't that their usual style? Clarice sneered, her upbringing having exposed her to too much darkness. His Holiness now holds the position of Pope, not only wielding the authority of a nation but also serving as the spiritual leader of billions of believers, with immense influence. It would be abnormal if those people didn't do something to weaken His Holiness's prestige and the positive image of the Catholic Church. Just then, Clarice's phone chimed with a notification. She glanced at the screen, her eyes lighting up. It's Blade. He says he has news about the demon. A smooth start, which invigorated both of them. The address? Logan immediately asked. Clarice recited a string of addresses. The president of the sanctuary conglomerate, sitting in the front, understood implicitly and immediately signaled the driver to change course and head to the location provided by Blade. The vehicle drove into the bustling urban area, finally stopping in front of a magnificent skyscraper. The accumulation of wealth by the vampires over thousands of years was evident here. It seems Blade is doing quite well now, Clarice remarked, looking up at the towering building after getting out of the car. Guided by the reception staff, the two took the elevator directly to the top floor. Blade had opened up the top 3 floors of the building, transforming them into a private space that integrated living quarters, a training ground, and an equipment armory. It looks like your life is quite comfortable now, Clarice said, surveying the modern yet practical environment. Blade, still wearing his iconic sunglasses, cool and composed, nodded slightly. Thanks to you too. After gaining the power of the blood god, his eyes had turned crimson, so sunglasses became a permanent fixture to avoid unnecessary trouble. Enough small talk, this is the intelligence you requested. However, the information I've gathered is more extensive than you might imagine. This fellow is different from ordinary dark creatures, he's more evil and troublesome. Moreover, he's likely not acting alone, he should have companions, though the exact number is unknown, and their objective is also unclear. Blade handed 2 prepared files to Logan and Clarice. Logan quickly scanned the documents, his brows furrowing tighter and tighter. Their movements are completely erratic. It's as if they're searching for something. The specific objective is still unclear. But what's certain is that these demons treat human lives as dirt. According to incomplete statistics, over 100 people have been killed since their appearance. Blade said in a deep voice. Blade had heard about Yi Feng's previous encounter with the hell demon god Valak, which prompted him to delve into the scattered records about hell in ancient vampire texts. He discovered that the forces of hell and the dark creatures on earth seemed to be 2 parallel lines, and hell appeared to have no interest in the souls of dark creatures. These innocent slaughtering fools. Fire ignited in Clarice's eyes. Without further ado, let's first investigate the place where they last appeared and see if we can find any clues. Logan closed the file and made a decision. A word of caution to you too. The military's special forces have also intervened in this matter. Be extremely careful. If you encounter any trouble, contact me at any time. Before they left, Blade added with a solemn tone. Understood, we'll be careful, Logan nodded gravely. He knew that beneath the surface of subtly easing relations between mutants and humans, suspicion and hostility had never truly disappeared. If certain forces believed they had an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, eliminating both them and the demons, and then claiming that both sides perished, they would absolutely show no mercy. Logan had no illusions about this. After bidding farewell to Blade, the 2 got into the waiting vehicle. My lord Logan, where to now? The president of the sanctuary conglomerate awaited further instructions. You handle your own affairs, your sanctuary conglomerate doesn't need to get too involved in supernatural events. Having just taken over the conglomerate, you have many things to do. Regarding the travel of the Catholic Church's Saint Seiya Legion, the sanctuary conglomerate should establish a dedicated service team. You are the president of the sanctuary conglomerate, not a mere servant. Logan replied. I understand. Thanks for watching.